Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a new series on the channel. I'm Owen Finch, and I'm here with the man that's got so many nicknames and is making a grand return with a championship that used to be on the old Aftershock Corner and everything like that. Smoke Slayer, Rockland Rampage. I mean, I can say this nickname today because the thing we're reviewing is about him. Vince McMahon, Ronald Trump, because he's going to show up in this docu-series at some point. Steve Steiner, can't forget that one. That's the biggest one. I probably forgotten so many because you just have so many nicknames. I probably forgot something, but
we'll come up with a new nickname
again. Another one, like
the Wrestling Jedi.
Wrestling Jedi. How does that work though? You can't really seem to get anyone to do anything that you want on the show. It's kind of like you never really so it's not really.
If people want to come for this belt, the predictions are available for the Royal Rumble. Anybody can make a prediction if they want to.
Yeah, we didn't do many predictions last year, so I don't even know who the champion. I don't think anyone. I might have to vacate the belt because I don't even remember who the champion is anymore, type of thing.
I think. Well, just to be safe, we'll say I'm the de facto champion.
De facto champion. You're just gonna pull a Triple H from 2002 and just get the belt. You'll be the first champion, type of thing.
Award myself the belt.
But yeah, anyhow, we're starting a new series on the channel. I don't know exactly how active the series is gonna be because obviously it's just gonna depend on how well. And how linked up our schedules become. It could be once a month. It could be once every few months. It could just be whenever we can get around to it. It could be every week. I'm not really sure. Well, this is the Wrestling Docu-Series Deep Dive. Pretty much, I've been watching a lot of wrestling documentaries lately on A&E, and then I watched the Mr. McMahon documentary, which is what we're reviewing today. I watched the Bray Wyatt documentary. And Chris and I reviewed it. We reviewed the Cody one a couple years ago, and they kind of took a lot of shine across the Aftershock Corner, so we figured that we would start a new series. This is kind of how a lot of the series start. We'll start talking about it, on the other show, and then it just becomes its own thing. That's how that show got started. It's not that uncommon for TV shows. I'm pretty sure they've talked about this. Wheel of Fortune wasn't its own show originally. It was like something else originally. So it's not like we're taking anything from off the class of the old playbook.
The Simpsons wasn't its own show originally. It was part of the Tracy Ullman show.
So there you go. But yeah, excited. And obviously you and I are going to do the series together. Just because I think you watch a lot of documentaries, mainly Dark Side of the Ring, but you also watch the A&E stuff, and you watch a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. You've kind of wanted to do a series like this. Are you kind of excited to get this going, type of thing?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting it done. I think it'll be a good time to discuss some of them. I think we're definitely starting off with a hot one right now because there's more stuff starting to come out about it now. Again.
Yeah, absolutely. So, today we're covering Mr. McMahon. Yeah, this came out on Netflix last year. And I think I'd start off with this because, it's the most recent thing that's come out, and it's a documentary that everybody wanted for a while. And we're going to do all 6 episodes in one video. It's either going to be a really long video or it's going to be a really short video. It's going to be in the middle. I'm not really sure. Steve and I didn't really talk about the structure of this video. I made up the notes, but obviously it could go all over the place. Like the old Aftershock Corner days where we could just talk about a bunch of things. Steve could steal stuff on this video, which is going to be hard because we're not together, but he'll find a way.
I always do.
But, so I guess to kind of start this off, kind of going through some behind the scenes things, this documentary, had been rumored for a while. I think back in the pandemic, like in September, Netflix had mentioned, when they were doing their Q2 calls and everything like that, and WWE did this, that there was going to be a documentary series about Mr. McMahon. And we were pretty interested in it at the time. We didn't really know what it was going to be about because other than like the DVD, we hadn't really gotten like a full-on documentary about Vince McMahon. And the DVD, anyways, came out in 2003, and it was fairly one-sided. It was obviously had a lot of WWE corporate kind of into it. They talked about a lot of the stuff you would kind of expect them to talk about, but it was kind of mostly in favor of Vince. And I was going to talk about later.
You could see the lipstick on McMahon's ass from everyone that was smooching it during that documentary.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure like most of the people that were on it were like close to him, and like and again, it also came out in 2003, so like a lot of stuff's happened since 2003 with Mr. McMahon. Right. So obviously they started making this series. It was kind of surprising that Netflix got the series, so it kind of showed that, it wasn't going to be a WWE like corporate thing, because the network was still a thing at the time. And then, Peacock would buy it out later. So it was kind of surprising that Netflix got it. So we were kind of wondering, like, is WWE going to be involved? And we kind of got like a little bit of an answer to both those things. So then, in 2021, they started recording it, and they had it done. I think that wasn't this originally only going to be like 5 episodes, but obviously some things changed that, so they made it 6. Or was it always going to be 6 episodes?
So it was going to be 6 episodes, but that 6th episode was going to kind of be, where he is now. It still was, but just not in the way Netflix was expecting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Not the way anyone was expecting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure what was supposed to happen was we were supposed to get like a happier ending to it, but it didn't really go that way. Because when did they have this wrapped up, like, originally? Had the Vince stuff not come out, like, in 2022? I'm pretty sure it was pretty much...
So, I wasn't sure if they had said, so... I'll kind of spoil something right now. It's not really too much of a big deal to spoil it. They talk about how, in the middle of our filming, all the stuff came out. And, that's something like you have to look at and be, oh, yeah, did it really? No, I looked into it. They were literally recording as stuff was coming out on social media. So Vince looking down at his phone during one of the recording sessions, and kind of you see him go,
oh, okay.
And he says, hey, I have to go. I'm sorry. And then I'm sure they all look at their phones and they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. You're busy. You're really busy now.
Yeah. What episode is that? I'll have to go back and check that out, because I don't know if
that was the first or the last one. It might be both. Because I think they show a little bit of what's going to be on the series on that first episode.
Yeah.
And then at one point, you see him go like, oh, shit. I gotta go.
That's actually pretty funny. I didn't really know that, so I'll have to go back and watch it. But yeah, so then, it came out last year. I'm pretty sure, if I remember, it came out... I could just check the date online, but I'm pretty sure it came out like the 7th, because I remember it was like the week after Bad Blood, and Bad Blood was like the 5th. So it was like a couple of days later. I don't remember exactly the date. Just kind of talking about it before we kind of do like a deep dive episode by episode, story by story. And so that way you can talk for a bit. Overall, kind of without going into much detail about it and stuff, what you kind of think of the Vince documentary, Mr. McMahon. I know I keep calling it the Vince documentary, but that's not what it's called. It's Mr. McMahon. So what did you kind of think of it? So,
I mean, if you look at it, obviously it's about, if I had to tell you what it was about without saying Vince McMahon, because that feels kind of cheap to say, oh, it's about Vince McMahon. It's about answering the question, how similar is Vince McMahon to Mr. McMahon, the on-screen character? And I think, as you'll come to see, a lot of people seem to think that, Mr. McMahon is Vince McMahon exaggerated, as is most successful wrestling characters.
Yep.
I think Stone Cold might have been the one who said it. Most successful characters in wrestling are the ones who are themselves just exaggerated, and they get away with stuff that would normally get them arrested.
And, I don't really think Vince McMahon, because a lot of people answer it, but Vince McMahon himself isn't really the one that's able to answer it at the end of the day. He kind of doesn't really know. the difference between the two. And as we're going to talk about, there's going to be some lines in there where you can where is it Mr. McMahon talking or is it Vince McMahon talking type of thing.
Right.
Overall, I thought this documentary was pretty solid. A lot of people, I think, thought this documentary was hit or miss. That some people really hated this documentary. Some people really loved it. I don't really think there's like an in-between. I'm probably the one that's going to be the only one that's in between. I thought I liked it, but this definitely was something to appease like a casual fan who's like really never watched wrestling before, because I think, as you know, we watch the product pretty regularly, and we're pretty much hardcore fans all throughout. I think there's not really much in this documentary that like came out of it that like we didn't know. The only thing that maybe that came out that I didn't know was Eric Bischoff like got a tryout before with WWE. I didn't get it. That's like the only thing I really didn't know.
Yeah.
And maybe that like I think I had known about it, but like the lady referee, which we'll talk about, like obviously had some accusations against Vince McMahon, but even though I didn't know it, I wasn't surprised by it when I heard about it type of thing. So, yeah. Anything you didn't know about this documentary, I guess, before that, like, or did you know pretty much everything that they talked about?
I didn't know a whole lot about Vince's childhood.
Right, that's true.
I just don't think I ever really had a reason to. I had heard that him and his dad had a very polarizing relationship where it was, it's hard to describe, I guess. It seems like, that Vince loved him because he was his dad, but probably didn't like him too much.
Yeah, we don't really get...
He was absent for the first half of his childhood, and then, I think he appreciates some of the life lessons he got from him, but I don't think he's afraid to look back and say, he was a dick, though.
Oh, yeah. I would definitely agree with that.
He probably looks at that and says, I probably rubbed off on me a little bit, too.
Yep, and you kind of see it.
Did.
Episode...
if there's anyone out there that wants to call Vince McMahon a monster, monsters aren't born, they're created, as the saying goes.
Yeah, and we get...
So maybe take that into account.
We get like a deep dive, kind of going through how each episode was kind of structured, because it was 6 episodes. How kind of it was structured is, it would obviously start at a certain point and end at a certain point, but each episode kind of had like a cold open, kind of like, which kind of makes sense because you're obviously leaving off at a weird spot. So, like, the episode about the screw job opened up, like, talking about the screw job with Wendy Richter and Fabulous Moolah, which made sense because that tied in really well. There was an episode that like talked about like Vince's early years watching wrestling and everything like that. There was another cold open that like talked about like his family dynamics, and I'm pretty sure there was the episode 6 is probably like the most notable cold open where Vince like talked about like how he has like multiple brains working, and sometimes he's like thinking about too many different things at once. And then when he got asked, what does he think about now? He said sex. That obviously didn't really land too well because that was the same episode, where we find out about all that stuff that's come out about him recently and everything like that.
Well, I say, Ellen, if you want to open up episode 1, I have to step away briefly to take care of something real quick, but I am going to be listening in. I just have to take care of cooking dinner for my dog because she's old. And
that's fair.
When dogs get old, you have to cook dinner for them.
I mean, any dog does, but yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So I'll be listening if you want to take it from episode 1.
Yeah, so let's just get going with this. Episode 1, they kind of do like a little bit of a mini code open. And they kind of like, show Vince McMahon kind of what he's doing in the present day. Since this was filmed in 2021, it's, when I say present, it's like the present in that sense of things. Kind of what he does day to day, running WWE, and kind of working behind the scenes and everything like that. Him, in his office and things like that. And, they kind of tell you that this documentary series had been made for a while, as we talked about. And, it shows everyone kind of sitting down, getting ready for their interviews. It kind of gives you like a little mini, montage, kind of talking about all the stories that they're going to talk about and everything like that. Yeah, we get kind of like a little bit of a deep dive. I thought it was pretty nice. It kind of mentions, that this had like started, we started recording this, and then there's a lot of stuff that came out about Mr. McMahon after this, so we had to come back and like reshoot this and everything like that. That's why this documentary series is out pretty late and everything like that. And then we get like the actual start of the episode and everything like that. And the episode actually starts out, we get kind of a glimpse into Mr. McMahon's childhood. They don't give you like a deep dive, kind of like you've seen before, like in the A&E documentaries, or in some of the Dark Side of the Ring segments, where they'll kind of go through like the wrestlers' back history. You get you get some of it, but you don't get a lot of it. They kind of talk about, how Mr. McMahon, never really knew his father that much in his life. He was pretty much out of action through most of his early years in his life, and he didn't really meet his dad until he was 12 years old. He mentioned, that he was beaten by his stepdad, and he talks about how how when he finally met his dad, he always kind of had like this big picture of what his dad was going to be like, because he had heard stories about him and stuff, but he never really met his dad, and he had like a different vision of what his first altercation was going to be like with his dad. I think he said that he thought that, there would be like this big moment where you would see like in movies when a kid meets their dad for the first time. It's a big heroic moment. He kind of talked about how he didn't really get that with his dad. His dad was kind of very, he was very centered focused and just kind of wanted the best for like Mr. McMahon and everything like that. And he talked about how he wanted Vince just to succeed, and he was more goal-oriented with Vince McMahon and everything like that, which makes sense, I guess. So kind of like... and then it kind of talks about how he met Linda McMahon, and Linda McMahon kind of shows up a lot throughout the early couple of episodes in this documentary series. They talk about how they were high school sweethearts, pretty much. I believe Vince said he was 15, 16-ish when he met her. And then she talks about how she was 13, 14 when they met. So they were kind of high school sweethearts. And they don't do a deep dive into episode 1 of how, Vince and Linda met. They kind of talk about that more in episode 5, but it was kind of cool to hear about it. But, they kind of mentioned originally, because Vince really didn't come from like a high class society like we all kind of probably envisioned that he did. He kind of was like a working class type of thing, and he was kind of a bad boy when he was in high school and everything like that. And Linda kind of came from like that upper class rural type of community, and Vince talked about how he kind of wanted to be a part of that and everything like that, which is kind of how he met Linda and everything like that. And he talked about how they did everything together, and kind of talked about how Vince got into the wrestling business. Vince kind of saw wrestling, started watching it, and he had heard that his father was a big promoter. He was the best promoter in the business and everything like that. And Vince kind of wanted to kind of get involved with that. He wanted to kind of work in his dad's business. And his dad didn't really want him, I don't think, in the business. He kind of talked about, he kind of gave Vince some odd jobs. He was the interviewer at one point. He kind of worked behind the scenes and everything like that. But then eventually, when the time came and, he needed a commentator one night, Vince McMahon Sr. threw Vince out there as a play-by-play commentator. And Vince really didn't know a lot about commentary. And, Bruce Pritchard mentions this, that Vince was a horrible commentator, and I've talked about this in past retros before, which I largely agree with. But Vince knew how to tell stories and everything like that. and how to like make people feel things, and kind of made it kind of like a sports entertainment type of world when he got into the commentary role, instead of actually calling the moves play by play. And I guess something I forgot to say in the beginning of the documentary, because this is appeals to a casual fan, they kind of use the beginning parts of the documentary to kind of tell us like what wrestling is. I really mentioned that here, obviously, because we were wrestling, but he talks about wrestlers are about characters. It's not about the athletics. It's about making people feel things and all that type of stuff. And it was kind of cool to hear like what Vince described wrestling as, because you never really hear Vince describe wrestling really. So I thought that was pretty cool. Eventually it came time for it. Vince McMahon Sr. kind of wanted to retire, and he was kind of trying to figure out what to do with the business. And originally, Gorilla Monsoon was going to buy the business from Vince McMahon Sr. It was, he was supposed to be kind of the heir to Vince McMahon Sr. And Gorilla Monsoon kind of always saw Vince McMahon Jr. As competition and everything like that. And Vince McMahon, kind of wanted to be the one to run the business and everything like that. So him and his dad came up to an agreement where he would get, not give him the business, but he would let him run it. And he had to meet like 3 payments at one point and everything like that. And if he didn't meet all 3 payments, he would basically yank the business away from him, type of thing. And this is kind of like where you kind of wonder, like what Steve mentioned earlier, did Vince actually like get along with his dad? Because a lot of this moments here, Vince McMahon Sr., it was kind of questionable whether or not he was kind of trying to make Vince McMahon fail. And Linda McMahon put it best. I don't think Vince McMahon Sr. wanted Vince McMahon Jr. to fail, but I think he didn't want to make it easy for Vince McMahon Jr. to get the business. He wanted to make it hard for him and everything like that. And I definitely see that. And it's kind of cool to hear how Vince gets the money to really able to buy out Vince McMahon Sr. because he mentions that pretty much he used like the loan profits and stuff like that pretty much to kind of buy him out. So essentially running their shows and everything like that is how he buys out Vince McMahon Sr. and everything like that. And he talked about how he nearly didn't make all 3 payments, but he eventually did make all 3 payments. And now he owned the wrestling business pretty much. Well, not the wrestling business, but the WWF at the time. And Vince McMahon kind of had a vision of what he wanted to do with the wrestling business. Obviously, because back then, wrestling was in the territory system. Everybody wrestled in a certain territory, and no one really messed with the territory system. And this is when Vince kind of wanted to expand and kill the territory system, pretty much. He wanted to go nationwide and everything like that. So, he kind of started to poach all of the other territories and everything like that and get all their talent. And he needed to kind of get, he had the sports entertainment vision that he wanted to have for, wrestling and everything like that. Because, at the time, Bob Backlund was the WWF champion, and he kind of wanted to get he thought Bob Backlund was a bit too vanilla and a bit too bland to be champion. So he wanted to really make wrestling mainstream and everything like that. So he had an idea where he used the Iron Sheik, and he made him the biggest villain, and Vince would always stick with whatever was hot in the world and pop culture and everything like that, which is what, and the Iron Sheik represented the Iraq War and everything like that. And he wanted to have the ultimate babyface, the ultimate good guy that he could really market around and everything like that. And, this kind of talks about the rise of Hulkamania and how that kind of came to be and everything like that. Hulk Hogan, it talks about kind of how he got into the business and everything like that, because originally Hulk Hogan worked for Vince McMahon Sr. he talked about how originally he was booked as a villain, and Hulk Hogan had all these other movie opportunities and everything like that when he went to Rocky 3. But Vince McMahon Sr. fired him because obviously he says, you're a wrestler, you don't do that type of crap. And then Hulk Hogan kind of started doing the persona that we know Hulk Hogan as, like in the AWA and everything like that. And Vince McMahon Jr. kind of gave Hulk Hogan a call, and he wanted to know if he wanted to take over the wrestling world pretty much and everything like that. And yeah, Hulk Hogan, went over to Vince McMahon Jr. And joined the WWF, and he beat, obviously, the Iron Sheik, which was the start of Hulkamania and everything like that. And, yeah, Hulk Hogan, pretty much made the wrestling mainstream from that point on, pretty much. It was kind of the change of the territory system, kind of, and to like that sports-like feel to professional wrestling that Vince McMahon Jr. had to the sports entertainment field. Hulk Hogan became like the face of WWF and the face of professional wrestling. But Vince McMahon, had another vision. Because originally he was supposed to go on vacation. His wife thought he was working too hard. And during this time, Vince McMahon was trying to think of like a big event that could bring wrestling and pop culture and celebrities together. And he called it WrestleMania. Obviously, he didn't really go into detail of how WrestleMania got its name, but if you know wrestling, obviously, originally WrestleMania was going to be called the Colossal Tussle, but then Howard Finkel came up with WrestleMania itself because of Beatlemania that was going on around that time and everything like that. So, Vince McMahon started WrestleMania, and Vince McMahon talked about how it was a huge gamble for him to even do WrestleMania. They had to, basically, I forget the proper term for it, but he had to not auction off his house, but like take out a loan on the house, pretty much. And it was like they basically put everything into WrestleMania. And as we know, WrestleMania ended up being a huge success, which made the WWF mainstream, and that's kind of what effectively kind of ultimately killed the territory system and everything like that. A lot of the end of the documentaries kind of about them showing what was kind of going down during WrestleMania and everything like that. And them bringing in that mainstream attention, like Mr. T, and all those other people and everything like that, Muhammad Ali. And yeah, WrestleMania ended up being a huge success, and obviously, if that hadn't have been, Steve and I wouldn't be doing this video today. Chris and I talk about that all the time. And that was kind of episode 1. Episode 1 was kind of, the end of it was kind of the success of WrestleMania, and it looked like Vince McMahon was at the highest of highs and everything like that. So yeah, Steve, since you're back, overall thoughts on episode 1. I have the notes.
I like episode 1. I like that it just really explains, it's all background information, which is what a good first episode should be. Like we had said off screen prior to recording this, this was a very good documentary for a casual fan who's not super intertwined with what's going on in the world of professional wrestling, but they're aware of it and they're like, hey, I want to know more. It's like, all right, well, let's make sure you know what you need to know for this.
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously Vince McMahon's a guy who's been painted in many different lights. I think episode 1 paints him in really a good light. It shows he was a smart businessman. Anytime he might have been a little in less than a good light, it was just business, and you can kind of see that. He wanted to run his father's business. His father had uncertainties about it, which was fair, but Vince charged forward and made it happen.
I guess the questions I'll ask you too, because you didn't get to be here, and I wanted us to hit all these moments. Do you think, because obviously this was a big thing that came from episode 1, do you think Vince McMahon Sr. wanted Vince McMahon Jr. to fail running his business, or do you think he just put obstacles in the way to see what Vince McMahon had in running the business and all that type of stuff?
would say he probably wanted him to succeed. I mean, there's no reason I don't think Vince McMahon Sr. had any reason to want Vince to fail. So I would say he probably put some obstacles in his way because he wasn't sure. Maybe he wasn't confident in him. I don't think it was for reasons of wanting him to fail, more so that he just didn't think he could do it. Obviously, he was proven wrong.
Oh, yeah, he absolutely was.
The problems that we'll get to with Vince McMahon really aren't about him not being able to run a business. I mean, obviously, creative is a different story, but that doesn't even start until later in his career, so...
And then, other questions I guess I can ask is, do you think because of Vince McMahon's childhood, I mean, we talked about this off camera, or maybe we just talked about it now.
Yeah.
But do you think that's kind of why he is the way now? Because they mentioned, he didn't meet his dad until he was 12. And it wasn't like a heroic moment like he thought, in the movies. He would have this heroic moment. And then, he was beaten by his stepdad. Do you think that's why, like... he wants control over everything because he didn't have much of a control of his life back then.
I'd imagine so.
And then
I'd imagine so.
I mean, the biggest thing I didn't mention that I forgot, because Vince McMahon, I talked about killing the territory system. Obviously, this made him not very well liked in the wrestling community because the territory system was not something you messed with back then. And Vince McMahon Jr. Was actually messing with the territory system. And his father, was getting a lot of hate for it too, because his father hired his son and everything like that, and they just didn't really understand it. Not really a question, I'm just making sure I mentioned that. And obviously I didn't cover his dad's passing and Vince's reaction to it, because I'm pretty sure, I think Vince said like a couple of days before that, like his dad had finally said he was proud of him and everything like that, with how he's done about the fact that he was able to meet all his payments, buying out the company and everything like that. His dad finally said he was proud of him, and he thought that was a good moment for him and everything like that. But then he died. I think he said like a few days later and all that type of stuff. Do we know what his dad died of? Because they didn't mention it in the documentary. Because his dad was pretty young when he passed and everything like that.
I have my PC right in front of me. So I'll just go look it up. Let's see.
Because I think it said in the documentary his dad died when he was 63. So,
pancreatic cancer. 69.
Okay. Yeah, they might have said it. I think it was in a newspaper article, and everything like that. So that's And do you think Vince was a good commentator? Because the big thing of the doc is he wasn't a good commentator, but he was able to kind of make people feel things. Do you agree with that, or do you think differently?
I don't think Vince was a good play-by-play person, but I think he was an excellent storyteller. And I think he had a good voice for commentary. And off topic, but kind of on topic. Everyone always jokes about how bad the XFL, the football league, was, but no one ever says, everyone's will always say if there's one thing they do have that's a fond memory, it's Vince with his grizzly voice doing, "Welcome to the XFL."
Yep.
Like, the way he talked, like, it sounded like this was going to be the hottest shit on planet Earth when it launched. And that just comes down to presentation.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. He's also tweeted, he, as we hear in this documentary, it sounds like he didn't really get the proper training to be a commentator either, because, no. He had to be thrown out there last minute, and that was pretty much his shtick for a while and everything like that. So, do you want to take, because I have the notes for you. I mean, because episode 1 was called Junior, which makes sense because that's about him. Unfortunately, episode 2 is called Heat. I feel bad for you because you get a lot of the bad stuff you got to talk about. Because episode 2 kind of takes a little bit of a dark turn for a little bit. So you want to talk about episode 2 a little bit and everything like that?
Yeah, I'll take episode 2. I mean, I was disappointed when I saw it was called Heat because I was like, oh, yes. And then I can't wait to talk about it.
No, it was there for a while.
I started watching it, That's nice. um, yeah. So yeah, we get into episode 2 of the series. We have obviously the success of the first WrestleMania is riding high. Saturday night's main events is also ongoing at that time. But one of the downfalls to that is now everybody's on the road 24/7 because of it.
Yeah.
And obviously, this is something that's normal for wrestling fans nowadays. I mean, I think they've been able to kind of work the system a little better than what it used to be, but they're still on the road 250 days a year.
Yeah, they mentioned in the
What
documentary.
they're doing, it's not stuff you want to be on the road doing because they're just tearing their bodies apart.
I mean, I think they said, because a lot of the journalists and stuff mentioned this, like it's a lot, because this is 2021. It's a lot better nowadays and everything like that. Because I'm pretty sure that's when the road schedule was limited, obviously, because pandemic kind of limited it. And now with the new regime, I'm pretty sure for the most part the limited house show dates now and everything like that, which is good. So
yeah.
But yeah, they're on the road every day. Continue.
Yeah, so outside of that, though, they're on the road, and obviously everyone's feeling overworked. So a little bit before WrestleMania 2, Jesse Ventura decides he wants to unionize his wrestlers, something that he would stay on for many years to come. I don't know where I feel like he's probably given up on it now, considering he's back with the company. I mean, then again, I'm also guessing Triple H probably makes a union feel a little less necessary, and probably, well, not even probably, we know he gives a lot of good benefits to his stars now. Like he filmed the Christmas Raw ahead of time. So stuff like that.
I mean, a lot of the shows last fall before they went to Netflix were pretty. I think there was a lot of tape shows going on around that time. So
yeah, and then Hogan ratted him out to Vince, and Ventura got released for it. I mean,
I'm pretty.
That's not.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was left out of the doc too. Hogan didn't I think Hogan mentioned he did it, but he didn't mention. They kind of didn't really mention that, like, the consequences of Hogan's what Hogan did.
And that's just an example of when you hear of why did guys not get along with Hogan. Well, there's one reason.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were guys who were probably agreeing with Jesse Ventura, but they were smart enough to agree in silence.
I agree. So,
and then WrestleMania 2 happened. It was WrestleMania 2 was the one where, if you look back at it, it's the one where they experimented a little bit. They did the multiple locations. It was still WrestleMania, so numbers wise, it did well, but in person wise, it was a bit of a mess.
Yeah, definitely.
I think they made the best of it, but honestly, when I think of problems with WrestleMania 2, that's not what I think of. I think of how they had lightning in a bottle with, and this is kind of off topic, but since we're talking about Mania 2, I just think of how they had lightning in a bottle with the Piper Mr. T boxing match, and they screwed it up.
Yeah.
But that's beside the point.
And I feel like, too, a lot of the stuff, it was kind of the opponent they threw at Hogan at WrestleMania 2 was a little weird. King Kong Bundy, they probably should have, I can understand doing Bundy, I guess, because they were building him up, but I feel like no one. Then again, it was the 80s, so maybe, but I feel like it's kind of tough to. I don't think.
I did take the opportunity to ask one of my coworkers who watched in the 80s. I'm like, hey, was the Walking Condominium as dumb as a nickname then as it is now? I was told yes. Everyone thought that was a horrible nickname. Like, call him a giant, call him a boulder, a rock. The Walking Condominium, that is the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
But yeah, they experimented a bit, with WrestleMania 2. I mean, they've only tried doing the 2-location thing one other time, and that was for Raw 25, and that didn't really work well either. So I'm glad that they're not doing that anymore, type of thing. So
WrestleMania 3 happened. Obviously, that one was record breaking for in-person attendance, viewership. Hogan slamming Andre.
Yeah.
Just, Mania 3 was really the peak of the 80s in terms of wrestling. Outside of this documentary, like I said, I've talked to people who watched in the 80s, and they've all said, yeah, Mania 3, it really didn't get much better than that. That was where you saw the business kind of peak. It didn't fall off after that, but the descent started there. It was a slow descent, but nothing was going to beat that.
Yeah, Mania. They spent a good part of episode 2 like talking about Mania 3. Talking about how it showed Vince's creative vision with booking Hogan versus Andre. That was kind of the biggest thing they talked about. He finally got Andre to get the operation that he needed, because I think he probably extended Andre's life a little bit by having him get that operation and everything like that. And then they talked about obviously you mentioned the stuff, but then they also kind of mentioned the big conspiracy theories. Was it actually that many people that were there? Was it really that pinnacle of a show? Because this is where they talk about all that stuff, and then it shows Meltzer afterwards mentioning like Hogan had slammed Andre a ton of times before that. Hogan was already a star by that point. All that type of thing.
That's true.
So
it's common knowledge now that plenty of other people had slammed Andre up to that point, but nobody had slammed Andre on national TV.
Yeah.
No one had slammed Andre on a stage of that magnitude.
Right.
It just comes down to the fact that put everything aside, that move is the single most important singular wrestling move to this day in the business. Period. Every punch, kick, hold, DDT, suplex, whatever, that singular slam is still, to this day, the most important wrestling move that has ever been performed.
Yeah, and it's really kind of cool, because Hogan talked about it in that documentary. Like, he didn't even know he was winning that match, obviously, because, Andre was the locker room leader at the time. And, Andre, he said he didn't know he was going to win until Andre's shoulders went down for the 3 count, pretty much. So we could be having a different conversation today had Andre decided not to put Hogan over and everything like that.
I was going to say, I highly doubt there was ever any doubt in Andre's mind putting him over, because if you've seen the Andre the Giant documentary, he himself knew at that point in his life he was slowing down, so he needed to do whatever he had to do to get out. Yeah,
definitely. But yeah, I guess because I'm also sticking to WrestleMania 3 because I feel bad for you, because you're going to talk about like a bunch of scandals that happened after WrestleMania 3. So the biggest, do you think it actually did break the attendance record, or do you think they fudged the numbers and all that type of stuff?
I think both. I'm sure they fudged the numbers a little bit, but I'm sure the attendance record was still broken.
That's true. We were both at the, because this had the attendance record for a while. We were both at the one, obviously, that did get the attendance record for a while. So
sometimes, rather than trying to count really anything, rather than trying to count the numbers of how many people are actually there, sometimes I think it's more important to just use your eyes and look.
Yeah.
If it looks like it's pretty effing crowded, it's pretty effing crowded, and I think that's what matters most.
But yeah, there's I feel bad for you, because you had to talk about some scandals that came out of that post WrestleMania 3. Not because of WrestleMania 3. I make it sound like WrestleMania 3 was the cause of these scandals. They just happened after WrestleMania 3. So.
So let's see what we got for scandals. I got your notes in front of me. We do have a list here.
Yeah, it just was one after another, and we talked about some of these off camera. So,
all right, so we got the Ring Boy scandal, which is obviously, I believe that's the one with the Ring Boy saying, they had been inappropriately touched, propositioned, all this.
Yeah.
I believe it was a mix of Vince and some of the wrestlers, but I don't believe it was ever proven.
Right. I'm pretty sure because I remember hearing about it. I'm pretty sure the documentary like reopened that case too a little bit. Like they started talking about it again.
Yeah.
So, Pat Patterson was a big thing that was mentioned in this scandal. And he was gone for a while, and then he like came back. So like he was the only one innocent, I guess, out of all of that. But like the other two guys didn't come back ever. So they met. Not a scandal, but they met. Cause Tony Atlas, he's actually a big part of this documentary, which is pretty surprising. He mentioned like that one point that like Pat Patterson grabbed his pecker and everything like that, and then the guy interviewing was like, "Well, who did you go to?" And he's like, "Well, who am I gonna go to?" And the guy's like, "Well, go to Vince, go to someone." And then the guy Tony had to be like, "Well, you've never been in the wrestling business, have you?" So kind of showing like these scandals are happening, and there's no one really to go to when these scandals take place and everything like that.
But, obviously it's not right, but the culture at that point, and I'm not condoning this. I'm just saying that this is probably what the culture was like back then. Was shit happens.
Yeah,
it's probably how they looked at it.
Right.
And obviously we know nowadays that that shit shouldn't happen.
Yep.
It did, and for that reason now, I think it does. For that reason now, it doesn't anymore. At least I hope it doesn't.
I hope not. But yeah, there's more scandals. Unfortunately, that came out around this time, which is unfortunate. That you got to talk about.
What was his name? I have the note here. The guy Hogan choked out.
Oh man, yeah, he shows up in the documentary too. I don't remember his name.
I'm not looking it up right now. Who did he do?
Yeah, you could probably do, but yeah. While you look
Richard Belzer.
Yeah, what happened to Richard Belzer? That scandal.
Yeah, choked him out so bad he woke up on SVU.
Pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what happened there. I don't know if Hogan was legitimately pissed off at him and choked him out, or if he put him in it and Belzer just wasn't ready for it. And I guess the big thing in there is Hogan probably should have known enough to be like, if he does go out, I just need to hang on to him so I don't drop his ass. That was the problem.
Yeah.
I think he said that it wasn't so much that he choked him out, it was that he dropped and smacked his head. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that one was the only one actually before WrestleMania 3 too, which kind of put that into jeopardy type of thing. So,
Jimmy Snuka's murder, Nancy Argentino, obviously, there's evidence that suggests that that stuff was kind of swept under the rug, and her family was kind of, just pushed to the side. Really,
yeah.
I feel like if we start doing Dark Side of the Ring reviews, that's something we can definitely go over.
The Vince tie
more in detail.
Why this ties in with Vince though is because obviously the big story is Vince might have bought him off or something like that type of thing. So we're not really sure about that. So
yeah. And then the steroid trial, another Dark Side of the Ring episode I'd like to review one day. But how that ties in is it was it U.S. versus McMahon, I think was the official case.
Yeah, it was the official case.
And I think when I say the steroid trial, I think when people close their eyes, the first image that pops up into their head is Vince in the dumb neck brace that made him look like an ostrich.
Yeah, it did.
But regardless, how it all ties together there is the early 90s. I don't blame the steroid trial entirely for wrestling's wavering popularity. I think it was I guess you could say it's attributed to oversaturation, even though the territories had kind of been diluted at this point. It was really just WWF, WCW.
Yeah.
I think it was not so much oversaturation with different companies, but with the same guys over and over again. That now is getting to the point of they want something, and not only that, but it was a cultural thing. The 90s were not the 80s. The 90s were hard rock and grunge. The 80s were hip hop, pop, and kind of more, just not as dark rock as the 90s. I also there's some good music in the 80s, but just beside the point.
I think too why they pointed that out
I
is
mean, for the record, modern music has nothing on the 90s or the 80s.
right, but I think the reason for why this probably got opened up too was a lot of the guys. It wasn't just the same guys; it was the same type of like bulky guys that they were pushing. They had all those muscles, and like some of the muscles just didn't look natural and all that type of stuff.
And he got off because of Hogan's testimony saying, he never made anybody take the steroids, but they were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do I think that's true? To keep it simple, yes. I don't think Vince McMahon, or rather, I don't think you're ever going to find proof that he ever directly said, I want you to take steroids. Hell, maybe he never did, because he could have just said, you need to bulk up. You need to get bigger. Now, I think anyone with a brain in the wrestling business in the 80s knows what that would have meant, but the question was, did he ever say, take steroids? No. So, it's true in a legal sense. That I could believe.
Yeah. But
do I think he knew about it and was probably making sure guys were staying big no matter what the cost, ends justify the means kind of situation? Yeah. I do think that's true. And obviously, if you go back to that time period, using Hogan as an example, you can tell he was coming off steroids because he became lean.
Yeah.
No, credit to Hogan. That kind of goes to show, like, he was always in good shape.
Oh, he was, yeah.
Like, lean Hogan was still a friggin' genetic jackhammer. It's just when you compare him to what he was in the 80s when he was blatantly juicing up every day, he was a real-life action figure.
And a big thing that came out of this was Hogan kind of lies here a little bit in the doc. Mentions like he never took steroids, but then obviously, like, I think Tony Atlas said that he was one of them that helped him take steroids at one point and all that type of stuff. As for my stance on it, I don't think Vince ever like told his wrestlers, like you said, to do steroids, but I think he definitely said bulk up, and they took it as if take steroids. And I think Vince knew what was going on, but because no one was really digging into it or looking into it and all that type of stuff, I feel like Vince thought he was getting off scotch-free. Because as Vince talks about a lot in his in this documentary, he doesn't fight fair, and I think his wrestlers taking steroids is kind of an unfair advantage for him and all that type of stuff. So that's kind of the end of episode 2. The only other things we could talk about is I forget the referee's name, but there's a referee that said Vince sexually assaulted and everything like that, but there was never any proof whether or not it did happen, so there was not enough evidence to run with it. Phil Mushnick, he ends up becoming a big part of this documentary, where he, all the other news outlets and stuff wouldn't really cover wrestling because it was wrestling, but Phil Mushnick was kind of the one that was kind of taking a stand and trying to run all these stories, and no one would just take him seriously and all that type of stuff. They mentioned he was backstage at a few shows, and it started off as him being good about interviewing things, but he obviously was interviewing the wrestlers about whether or not it was real. He was interviewing people, and he was obviously asking about the steroids and everything like that, and I think it eventually led to some of the wrestlers getting kind of physical with him, which kind of led to him suing them and everything like that. So this isn't going to be the last we hear of Phil Mushnick. How'd you feel about Phil Mushnick? I think he was fighting for the right reasons, but I think he had a little bit of a vendetta against the business, because at some point in this talks he kind of pisses me off. But how do you feel about Phil Mushnick and everything like that?
To be blunt, delivery counts. Okay. How you say something affects how it's going to be taken.
All right. But yeah, that's kind of the end of episode 2 overall. I thought that's a pretty solid episode. This is kind of to after every episode too, they kind of talk about like what the results came of these scandals and everything like that. So if you want to know what the results of them, you can just watch the episode. But they kind of talk about like the good or positive that came out of these scandals. But then going through episode 3, episode 3 is about the screw job. 2 screw jobs actually. This is where the code opens. It shows that Vince, if he absolutely has to, isn't afraid to screw somebody over because the cold open is about the first screw job that happened like in the 80s with Wendy Richter and the Cat. Wendy Richter, was supposed to lose the championship. She was going to leave the company and all that type of stuff, and she just refused to lose the belt. So Vince kind of had to force her hand, or force his hand and have her lose the championship. And, they did the first screw job where, someone, Fabulous Moolah, dressed up as the Cat, and she covered Wendy Richter, and Wendy Richter obviously kicked out, but then the ref didn't count it. So, this ends up kind of being a pivotal part. It's the first time where Vince will show that he's not going to fight fair. Wendy Richter wasn't very happy about this and all that type of stuff. So, this kind of caused her to lose her passion for wrestling, and she didn't come back. I think until she got inducted to the Hall of Fame, whenever that was. I don't exactly remember when that was.
No, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but Dark Side of the Ring, I think it's like the 6th episode when they talk about Fabulous Moolah. That is a huge plot point they talk about. And they have Wendy Richter herself talking about it.
So, yeah.
And it's funny because she says, like, when she got into the ring, I remember watching that episode. She's like, "All right, I've wrestled the Cat before. I know it's not her." And then she's rebelling. She's like, "Oh, whatever. She probably got hurt, and it's probably someone else. Whatever." And then she got stiffed, and she was like thinking to herself, like, nope, that's not Moolah. No way. And then once she got forced down hard, and the bell rang, it just all clicked in her head. She just immediately was like, "Yep, it's Moolah, 100%. I'm ripping that mask off right now." And then, lo and behold, ding, 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 we have a winner. Bad news, the winner's a loser.
Yep. But yeah, so and then it kind of wraps up the steroid trial, which you kind of already talked about. But then it kind of talks about what did the steroid trial have, how did it affect the WWF? Because obviously, even though they came out good, they were innocent in the steroid trial, it was affecting their core business because attendance wasn't the same. Before even the steroid trial, they tried to run the Warrior experiment, and it just didn't really work out, so they had to get the title back to Hogan, so they tried doing Sergeant Slaughter, the Iraqi sympathizer, and it was a bit too modern. It was too much, so they had to kind of end that as quickly as they could. Also, they kind of leave out the fact that Sergeant Slaughter just was in like his 50s, like late 50s when he won the title by that point, so it was kind of like at least they didn't run with that story where like they threatened to bomb like WrestleMania, so they had to move venues, because I remember they always ran with that story.
I've actually read a book. It was an old book on just like a few people who were WWE champion talking about their reigns, and one of the chapters is Sergeant Slaughter. It's all autobiography, so everyone writes their own chapter. So Slaughter talks about that, and I figured this would be a good opportunity to bring it up. He goes on to mention how the venue got threatened.
Right.
They had to move it, but before that, he was getting death threats. His wife, his kids were all getting threatened. And he said, that was starting to worry him, because initially they were going to let him beat Hogan, and they were going to make him into even more of a villain. They were going to, have that happen, and then everyone's going to have that, oh shit, no one can beat him then, like, what now? And that's when they would have, and in his head, he thought it was going to be Bret, because Bret was in the company that, at that point, everyone backstage kind of saw the writing on the wall, like, okay, Bret's going to probably be a locker room leader at some point. that that was something that surprised anybody. It seemed like to him, but Slaughter talks about how what sent him over the edge and absolutely made him decide to drop the belt was, I think, either the go home or the 2 weeks before tapings they were doing to build up to their match. Someone actually made it into the arena with a handgun.
Yep.
And was drawing it out while he was making his entrance, and security tackled him.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I would totally make that call too, to drop the title at that point, you know. But yeah, so they talked about, you know, how they tried the Warrior experiment and stuff. That didn't work. And they kept going back to the well with Hogan, but obviously people kind of get sick of Hogan a little bit because, you know, Hogan had run its course by that point. This is kind of where they get into the conversations, or like, were they ever going to turn Hogan heel? And they're like, Hogan's a good guy. I don't think he'd be a great bad guy. Vince mentions, you know, I don't think it's this episode. I think it's another episode where Hogan wanted to go into Hollywood. So Vince and Hogan wrote a movie, No Holds Barred, together. And it was what it was type of thing. It's a movie that happened type of thing. Maybe we'll review it someday. Oh, yeah. I think you do have it?
If we review No Holds Barred, that is going to require you, me, and a beer tower.
Probably. I don't think I've ever actually seen it, so I don't know how good. Maybe it is good. Maybe I will like it.
I've seen it. For me, I would rank it in so bad that it's actually good.
Right.
Category.
But so then, you know, obviously then the steroid trial stuff happened, so they kind of have to get away from Hogan. So they kind of pivot to, you know, more athletic and more character-based wrestling. You know, that's where kind of Razor Ramon, Diesel, Shawn Michaels, and Bret Hart come in. Bret Hart was kind of the flag bearer around the new generation, where it's not about muscles, it's about, like, athletics and how good you are in the ring and everything like that. But and, you know, Vince mentions this, unfortunately, Bret didn't have the personality at the time to be, like, the face of the company and everything like that. And, you know, Bret mentions this in this documentary that he knew Vince kind of didn't have, like, complete faith in him. He was just kind of a temporary guy while Vince could kind of figure out, like, how to kind of get out of this phase and everything like that. But, yeah, Bret, you know, mentions, you know, that he was, like, a real champion. He was a real person that everyone could relate to at the time and everything like that. And his run that he thought was going pretty well and everything like that. Meanwhile, though, on the other side of things, WWF kind of isn't doing all that well at this moment. WCW is starting to gain some traction. You know, yep. Ted Turner, you know, if we have a review who killed WCW, I think that's going to be the next probably thing we review in this series. But, you know, WCW, you know, needed to get their act together and everything like that. So, they came up with the idea to have Eric Bischoff kind of start to run things a little bit and take control. And Eric Bischoff kind of wanted to change WCW. And pretty much he poached a lot of WWF's talent. You know, he ended up getting Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and made the NWO out of it. And it was a really interesting angle and everything like that. And it culminated with Hogan being revealed as the third man. Obviously, before that, I didn't mention that, but, you know, he brought in Hulk Hogan, which was a big deal for them. Because Hogan, you know, when Hogan and Vince parted ways, Hogan agreed that he would never go against Vince. And obviously, Hogan went back on his word and it ended up hurting Vince's feelings. Linda talks about how Vince was crushed by that because obviously they had worked a good rapport and everything like that. And then Hulk Hogan became the third man in the NWO. I believe it's at this point here, which is kind of cool, where you find out, like I mentioned before, that Vince McMahon, way back when, could have prevented the growth of WCW had he hired Eric Bischoff, because Eric Bischoff did a tryout for WWF way back in the day, and he didn't get the post. And they asked Vince about this, like off screen, like on the doc. Do you regret not hiring Eric Bischoff? And Vince says no. He says he doesn't have any regrets. We'll probably mention this at the end of the doc. There's some points in the documentary where Vince will say something, but then something else he says like negates what he says before. Like Vince never has like a clear answer, and it's never the same answer type of thing. And I think we'll talk about this throughout the documentary. So, yeah. So then WCW is just kicking WWF's ass. A lot of things were working in their favor. They were live every week, while WWF was taped every other week. So Eric Bischoff would just give away the show half the week, so it caused people to tune out. Eric Bischoff was just doing things more raunchy. They were more mainstream with what was kind of going on in the culture and everything like that, and they just had more compelling characters. A lot of the talent wanted to work there too because there wasn't as many dates. That's why the NWO all ended up going. That's why Savage eventually went, and that's why all these other people went. And then it leads to Bret Hart was going to be one of those people that was going to be a Vince loyalist, type of thing. He was going to stick by Vince, and Vince panicked and signed Bret Hart to a 20-year contract. But Vince realized he wasn't going to have enough money to pay Bret.
Honor it.
Yeah, honor it pretty much. And he basically worked with Bret to get him out of that contract. But Vince fucked up and put the belt on Bret. So, Vince pretty much wanted Bret to lose the belt at Survivor Series, and this is kind of like when him and Shawn Michaels... We'll probably talk about this at another point, maybe Dark Side of the Ring, Montreal Screwjob.
This is a broken record, but if there was ever one where we really want to take our time, that's the one.
Yeah, but, pretty much Bret was going to lose the belt, but Shawn Michaels... he had his attitude problems at the time and everything like that, and Bret didn't want to lose the belt to Shawn. He said, and he didn't want to lose it, especially in his hometown.
So I will just give you a little something from the Dark Side of the Ring special that does a very good job, just piece by piece, making sure you're following along with the roadmap of what led up to the Montreal Screwjob. So it absolutely explains how bad Bret and Shawn hated each other. How the biggest blow up they had was bar none when Bret ripped out some of Shawn's hair, and then Shawn said he was going to leave. And that was around the time Vince was starting to realize he couldn't honor Bret's deal, because he was trying to find workarounds for it, but at that point, Vince was like, it makes more sense for me to keep Shawn because I still have a top guy if I keep him, and he's not the one I'm going to be paying a shit ton of money to. So, and he knew that Bret would be a little more understanding of it.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's what I told him. And then beforehand, Bret and Shawn, I think the day before Survivor Series, made up. They talked it out. They met in person, and they said, hey, I don't want us to leave on bad terms. I want us to, finally get things together or whatever, and we'll do it that way. And I'm like, all right, cool. And it seemed like all was good. And then Vince was still panicked about it. And Vince told him, hey, I still need you to drop the belt to Shawn. And Bret was basically like, yeah, no, we're in Montreal. And not for nothing, I still really don't want to drop to Shawn.
Right.
So, let me win, and I'll just drop it tomorrow on a handshaking deal. And I blame Medusa a little bit for this because of her dropping the women's title into the trash on WCW. That was what scared Vince.
Right.
Because, he was like, for nothing like that. destroyed the WWF's women's division for years.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure they that was like they had just brought that division back again, and they had to like put it on ice.
For them to bring it back, they had to first bring it back as the Divas, which was just sex drive to the max. Granted, that's what the '90s culture wanted.
Right.
He did the smart thing business wise, but it wasn't until Trish and Lita started wrestling that it finally got back to what it was. But that's not till the 2000s.
Yeah. Oh, this is off topic. Did you ever see that Most Wanted Treasures episode where, Mick Foley goes to Medusa's house to try to get the belt back and she wouldn't give it back type of thing? I don't know if you saw that. But
I've seen it, yeah.
That will be a review maybe someday.
Yeah.
I think that's the most, because they make up there, but, Mick Foley and her, I don't think leave on good terms that day when that happens, type of thing. So, but yeah, continue with what you were saying about the Montreal Screwjob and everything like that.
Yeah, so I do. So I think they made up, but Sean and him were still being a little snippy toward each other. Like Sean, I think he said something along the lines of, hey, they were talking hey, let's go out there and have a great match. I'm going to protect you. And Sean said something along the lines of, oh, I won't do that for you. And I think he did it just because he was in front of people, and it led to the whole thing. And whatever happened. I think at one point it might have been, but I'm trying to remember if it was Triple H or Bruce Pritchard. Could have been a combination of them, for all we know, that basically came to the conclusion of, Brett was acting like he was the real champion. I think it was Bruce Pritchard, because he's the one that points out, no, you are the character that we choose to be the champion, and when we say no more, that means no more.
Right.
And so, in retrospect, who do I think the real villain there was? I would probably lean more towards saying Brett.
Yeah, because
I understand why he felt the way he did, but at the same time, when your boss tells you to do something, you do it.
Yeah.
And he obviously didn't like hearing that.
Yeah, you could say the real villain's Medusa, though, because had that not happened, I don't think Vince would have been as worried and everything like that. So
yeah, that's also true.
But so yeah, the Montreal Screwjob happens. They show footage of it. I still think it's funny, because Triple H mentioned, because he shows up for this part of the documentary, I'm pretty sure, and he mentions, that him and Sean got on the phone, and Triple H goes, "Oh, F that," and every time I see that, I just think it's funny, because, they put it in the WWE, I think it's the WWE 13 game, they put that quote in there, which is pretty funny, so,
Yep.
That's
probably what I was thinking of.
But, yeah, so the Montreal Screwjob happens, and, it leads to him and Brett and Vince get into it. They talk about, Brett destroyed the arena, he wrote WCW, and he was just pissed, and, yeah.
And Vince really wasn't mad at him anymore after he did it. He felt like he was the villain there, and the story about Brett's walking up to him and stalking him, has been confirmed by both sides to be true, that he told him, I'm going to take a shower. If you are here when I get back, I'm going to punch you. And I guess Vince briefly thought about leaving. And Undertaker was there and goes, no. You're not going anywhere. You have to go take the punch. And Vince Burns said, yeah, I know I do. So Vince goes into the locker room, waits there for Brett. Undertaker stood in the doorway to make sure nobody tried to help. At Vince's order, Vince told him no one stops what happens unless he's really trying to kill me. Which he knew he was just going to punch him.
Yep.
So he walked out, he cold clocked him and knocked him out.
But
and the person I feel the worst for, the two people I feel the worst for out of the screw job, Earl Hebner.
Yep.
Because Brett asked him and made him swear that he wasn't going to screw him. And he said he wouldn't, knowing he was going to, because that's his job. And now, obviously, Brett said he doesn't hold any ill will. He shouldn't have put Earl in that position.
Also, too, Earl had got hate for this for like years up until like Slammiversary last year, where they finally he finally got to have redemption for it. Like Earl Hebner got hated for this for years anytime they went to Montreal, type of thing.
Yeah,
so.
And Sean, I also kind of felt bad for because he didn't know that they were going to do that, and once he found out, as much as they hate each other, he was like, "That is a terrible idea."
Yeah.
Because he was at that point of like, if after all I've done, no kidding, he doesn't want me to win the belt, and I'm actually at peace with that right now.
Right.
Like, let's not do this. And everyone's like, no, man, you're doing it. I'm telling you. It was like, all right, I guess the entire time he was in the locker room, like bawling his eyes out, and Brett was gonna say something to him like, oh, they're fake, but like when he actually walked up to him, he was like, oh, you're actually upset.
Right.
And so he just decided to, get his attention, shake his hand, and say, hey, you know what? Not for nothing. It was a good match.
Yeah. I mean...
and that was, I was like, yeah, I feel a little bad for Sean there.
Maybe when we do the Dark Side of the Ring deep dive, we'll answer the question, do we think the Montreal Screwjob is a work or a shoot type of thing? Because obviously, so that's been the biggest conspiracy theory that's come out of that, because of what's come out of it. So...
It was a shoot. 100%.
Yeah, I think because it's especially because of Brett can't even really talk about it without getting pissed. So that kind of makes me that's the main thing that makes me think it's a shoot. But yeah, that's the end of episode 3. Episode 3, I feel like episode 3 was less scandal driven. It was a lot about kind of the behind the scenes, kind of showing that business wasn't that greatest. Mm-hmm. This one was kind of a little bit more in favor of Vince. You kind of felt a little sympathetic for him and everything like that. So still off to a decent start. But now let's get to episode 4, Attitude. You want to take this one? You have to talk about good things this time.
Yeah, I do. For the record, to answer the question that I feel gets asked all the time, would the Attitude Era have happened without the Montreal Screwjob? Yes. I think it would have. But it would have been different, obviously, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for me to answer that question because the biggest thing that came out of the Attitude Era, the Montreal Screwjob was the creation of the Vince McMahon character.
To talk about the Attitude Era a little bit, I think, because I've gone back and watched that period of wrestling so many times now, because how can you not when you have access to it nowadays with modern streaming?
Well, not as much now since they just took all the Raw episodes off for the most part. So,
yeah, you gotta get a little creative with doing it, but still, I think going back to that period of time, obviously everyone says 95 was always the worst year in wrestling because the WWF was floundering. Yeah, poor Kevin Nash. He really fit the mold for who could have been a good champion, and he was just the right guy in the right place at not just the wrong time, the worst time.
Yeah.
And then obviously the only bright spot of 95 was Nitro premiering.
Yeah.
And while nothing really happened that was major outside of that first episode, it was just enough to say, okay, something's cooking here. And then obviously 96 Nitro is,
right,
once again, a story for another day, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, because the thing they always leave out is like, yes, 95 wasn't a great year for WWF. I know they tried to say like WCW was kicking their ass, but it's not like WCW is doing any better, because I'm pretty sure that's the same year the Terror of Doom stuff is still like going on. And if that's kicking WWF's ass, you have to have like a long look at yourself in the mirror type of thing. So
I'm just thinking to myself that Hogan promo. Oh my God, I've never been here. The water.
Yeah.
Wow, it's not hot.
Yep.
Oh, amazing.
Chris and I have talked about it. The Master's voice, like you could have your TV volume at like 4 and it would sound like it's at 100 volume. That's how loud he was and everything like that.
But hey, as me, you, and Chris will all agree, the best creepy character in all of WCW will always be Seven.
Yep.
You percent your win. Like, I don't want to get sidetracked because if I do that, I'm going off on a very big.
The one thing I love that AEW did was they referenced that in, because when the Dr. Otto offered him a spot, they offered him the number 7 position. That was like the best thing. I think one of the.
And you saw Dustin just being like, "That's good." He can't laugh. That's like good one. So yeah, obviously.
Well, one thing I forgot to talk about episode. They also talked about the Ted skits in episode 3. I forgot to mention that. That after that, maybe it's 3 or 4. I forget which one they talk about it, but they talk about how Vince ran the Ted skits because originally Vince wouldn't really acknowledge WCW because to him that's been a defeat. Then when he finally did, it was like obviously the Ted skits happened, and I think. I don't think they got sued, right? I think USA just forced them to take it down, or did they get sued? I forget which one, honestly.
If I remember correctly, Ted Turner thought it was funny because he just saw the pettiness as weakness.
Yep.
Which everyone did. Everybody did. Now, looking back on it, I think the billionaire Ted skits are hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
They're just so goofy. But at the time... Well, like we said, it's wrestling should always be culture driven.
Yep.
And at the time, that was not catching on with anybody. And I think all it did was make people probably want to tune into WCW more.
And I do remember why they were pulled. I'm pretty sure it's because the person who was like the founder of USA Network was really close friends with Ted or something like that, and they were kind of working together, and that's why they were pulled. So they were, but I just love to think that I wonder what Ted thought when they did get pulled. He was probably like, "Why'd you pull these? I thought these were great," type of thing. He was probably loving them, and
I always think of Vince. He talks about when Nitro started. He talks about he got the call from Tego. Hey, I'm in the wrestling business. He's like, oh, good for you. I'm in the entertainment business. And Vince said he didn't start beating him until he realized, no, it's not wrestling or entertainment. It's the combination.
Yep.
And once he remembered that, that's when, he knew he had him with attitude going on. And the point I was trying to get at was, not really so much 95, but 96. You go back to WrestleMania 12, right after Mania 12, because when you hear Attitude Era, there's only one man that's coming to mind: Stone Cold Steve Austin. And you go there right after that time is where he starts to become Stone Cold. Obviously, Austin 316 kicks off at King of the Ring, and that's where the fuse is lit. And obviously, that fuse burns all the way through 1996 into 97. And if you're wondering when the dynamite goes off, it's when the Montreal Screwjob happens.
Yeah.
Because, WCW was still fair and square kicking the WWF's ass in the ratings. But if you go back, 96 wasn't a terrible year for the WWF. It was actually pretty decent.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It could be mediocre, but it wasn't. It was nowhere near as bad as 95. And then you get to 97, and it's actually good. The problem is WCW is just great. I think it became a matter of WCW was great in 96 and 97. WWF was okay in 96 and good in 97. But then
I think a lot of people when they say 97 too is. If you look at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, it's the biggest shift outside of maybe 2022 that the professional that the WWF has ever gone through, pretty much.
Yeah,
I might say 97 is probably the biggest shift, but because 2022 even though it was a pretty big shift, it wasn't like a full on shift like '97 was type of thing. Like '97, it's like a completely different company from what it is like in the
Right.
beginning of the year towards the end of the year.
Yeah, exactly. But outside of that, so back to the main point here, though, the Montreal screw job happens, and now we have the creation of the Mr. McMahon character. And it's awesome seeing him finally become that character. I think Vince took the bad situation he had and made the best of it, and the best of it wound up being amazing.
Yep.
He knew because the good thing he did here was he didn't shy away from what he did. He owned it, and I think this is an example of you take your true self and then you exaggerate it, and that's how you come up with a wrestling character. Vince, obviously in his mind, thought he did the right thing and that Brett screwed Brett. And rather than just come on TV and say that and end it there, he realized, they're going to be pissed when I say it, but what if I said it, and then after I say it, I add in a little bit of if you have a problem with it, bite me.
Yeah.
That was kind of his viewpoint on it. It's like, all right, what if I tell people, if you don't agree with it, kiss my ass. And if you don't kiss my ass, then I will find someone to bend you down and do it for you.
And I think what's cool about this episode is because the cold open here was about like Vince wanted to get into the business and everything like that, and he mentioned like what who his favorite wrestler was, and he said he always liked the villains, the heels, when he was growing up and everything like that. He didn't really like the baby faces, so which makes sense. But his dad would never actually let him do it. Like, Vince, you don't do that type of thing. So like Vince finally got to be a character on TV and everything like that, which is what he always wanted, right, and everything like that. Which is kind of cool and everything like that. And I think Vince said he kind of took that status because it's like, it's what he thought rich people were like when he was growing up. So like he just kind of took what he thought and like exaggerated it and everything like that.
Exactly.
So,
and much like Stone Cold, the Vince McMahon character was a slow burn. He didn't go, he didn't go from 0 to 100 overnight. He had his big moment in Montreal, and then he let it simmer a little bit. Mm-hmm. He was on TV, he was accepting the booze, and it was just like, okay, yeah, whatever. It really starts to take off in early '98 when he gets Iron Mike Tyson to show up, and then Stone Cold comes out, shoves him over, and you see Vince is getting in his face. You're ruining it for us. Meanwhile, everyone's going crazy now. Everyone's booing Tyson because Austin doesn't like him, basically.
Well, those other reasons they were probably because obviously Tyson had some things he was dealing with too at that time. So
yeah, little earlobe beat.
Yep.
But then obviously DX starts, and Vince is present in the Shawn Michaels Stone Cold build up to WrestleMania 14. He's just that. He's present. He's not the main character yet. He is a background character, and they're obviously setting him up for after WrestleMania because they knew Stone Cold was going to win that title for some time. And then it's post WrestleMania 14 that it's like, okay, now go all in on being the big villain.
Yep.
And obviously, he had been stunned previously when he tried telling Stone Cold he had to take time off for his neck. I think that was before the Montreal screw job, though.
Right.
So I think it was just a matter of Vince probably doing the math. It goes, all right, well, I'm this big bad guy. I actually already have a reason not to like our big good guy, so this kind of works.
Definitely.
It was just how things fell into place for him, and then he was able to take that and obviously run with it. He took the stun of the night after WrestleMania, and then from there, I think he had Dude Love face him at Backlash. Then going into the summer, he was throwing everything he could at him. The Brothers of Destruction wound up getting the belt away from him. which leads to The Rock, and then Stone Cold vs. Roy. That's just where it all starts out. If you really go back to it, the best thing about it is Vince is pretty much the main villain for Stone Cold until The Rock comes in late 98, early 99, because then Vince looked at him and he's like, all right, you know what? I don't have to do so much work anymore because these guys are over as hell.
Yeah, yeah, that was cool. And because he became the corporate champion and everything like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, because even though he was always Mr. McMahon, he attitude ever wise, after WrestleMania 15, trying to save memories. After 15, he kind of slows down a little bit, and they let it be a little more Stone Cold character driven. Because 98 was very Vince McMahon driven, Mr. McMahon driven, rather.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you get to 99, it becomes Stone Cold driven. But unfortunately, we get to 99 over the edge.
Yeah, kind of going through some things before we get there.
Yeah.
They mentioned, like the company was doing real well too. The company was red hot. They was selling out. I've talked about this. 98 across all wrestling was probably the hottest period that it ever was at, where all three companies were just doing real well: ECW, WCW, and WWF. They kind of talk about, though, and kind of point out the fact that Vince ripped off a lot of Eric Bischoff's ideas, because Eric Bischoff mentions this, because the DX was a ripoff of the NWO. The Vince McMahon character was a ripoff of the Eric Bischoff character when he joined the NWO. And Vince kind of, he doesn't really shy away from it, which is kind of surprising, but he says, okay, but I did it better, type of thing.
I was going to say, when you're giving your company's results away on a weekly basis, that just goes to show all's fair in love and war. So, while Bischoff may be right, he didn't really have much ground to stand on.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, I think Vince did do it better because Eric Bischoff, I think, worked as the head of the NWO, but I don't think he really had a plan. He didn't really have that rival like Vince did. And I think Vince, obviously the NWO, they'll talk about this more in the next episode. Vince was kind of better at like striking and knowing when to end a story than Eric did, because Eric kept the NWO storyline going too long. And
yeah, exactly. Like not only that, but Hogan was the main villain.
Yeah.
And Bischoff was the side piece. Whereas Vince started out as the main villain, and once The Rock came into the picture and he saw how hot he was, obviously people were probably getting sick of Hogan. I think that's common knowledge now. People were really ready for something different in WCW. Later into the NWO, like you said, they didn't end it for a while. But as far as Vince goes, he knew when he shouldn't do as much work because, he had The Rock there to do a majority of the work. Even though The Undertaker and Kane, he had them in 98 as de facto villains going against Stone Cold. He knew that he should probably still be the main driving force because they didn't have a big tie to Austin. It was just, he's the champion, so cool.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing, too, Meltzer talks about in the doc is that WWF was also pushing newer stars than WCW was, like, towards the end and everything like that, too, which is what...
Once again, Hogan and Rock. Hogan old, Rock new.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. That and when it came to physicality, Vince was a better worker than Bischoff.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, like, the Attitude Era was doing real well. Like, not a lot can be done, but there's a big, unfortunate thing that happens in 99, and you just said it a minute ago, but let's just talk about it.
Yeah, Over the Edge 99 happens. Obviously, we've reviewed the Dark Side of the Ring episode. We'll do a more in-depth on the background of it, but everybody knows it's the pay-per-view where Owen Hart falls from the rafters during his entrance as the Blue Blazer.
Yep.
Hits the ring post and dies. It's tragic. It sucks. And obviously
I didn't know he hit the win post.
everybody,
I didn't know he hit the win
everybody,
post.
everybody. What's up?
I didn't know he hit the win post. I thought he just fell.
I think he fell and he like hit the turnbuckle.
Oh, okay.
And everyone in attendance and everybody in the back is obviously shell shocked. They don't know what to do. They don't, I cannot imagine being in that situation. So they're trying to figure out what to do. Vince decides the show has to go on. He, for whatever reason, I'm going to guess he probably didn't want to hand out refunds.
Right.
I know for years he said, well, we're there and we should probably just power. It's like, I could forgive Vince for powering through the show from a standpoint of he was so shocked and all the confusion. He wanted the show to keep going to buy himself time to come up with something. So if he had, sent them out to do another match to give him a little bit of time to figure something out, that I could forgive. That I could understand. Obviously, he wanted to power through the show and get it done. Whether or not it's because he didn't want to hand out refunds or because he was just generally so shocked he didn't know what to do.
Right.
Because because you know what, I'm pretty sure that no one ever makes a plan on what to do in those situations.
Yeah, because it's not something you want to plan around. The biggest thing he said in the documentary was like, because when they were doing his entrance and everything like that, like the arena was dark and everything like that, because I'm pretty sure they were doing a backstage segment, like as this was happening and everything like that. So in his mind, I guess he thought people didn't see it. But I don't know. I've been to an arena when it's been dark where you can still kind of see something. I mean, then again,
right.
though, this is also 1999, though. I haven't been to, so I don't know what the shows were like in '99. If you type of thing, so
it's probably the same. There's a difference between the colors black and gray.
Yeah,
it goes gray in the arena when you're there live. It goes black when you're watching on TV.
Yep.
It's the best way I could describe it. And obviously, Owen Hart passes away as a result, and the fallout of it is really a story for another day. I don't want to get into. I don't think I've made it a secret that I have mixed emotions on Martha Hart.
Right.
So let's just move on. I think that's where the episode ends, and I see you have a note here. Was Attitude Era too much?
Yeah, because the biggest thing how it ends is, because a lot of the things about the Attitude Era, that's kind of like at the point where everyone asks, was it too much? Because they talk a lot about how the women were used at the Attitude Era, that they was just sex objects. They were just kind of throwing everything at the wall. And they obviously didn't care about the bodies with the Hell in a Cell matches and everything like that. So, was the Attitude Era too much? It probably was, but it's also like, I mean, I'm gonna sound like not a broken record, but it just fit the culture at the time, so I can understand.
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say no, it wasn't too much, because too much was that was the end at the time. WWE, like, you can't point the finger of blame for the over sexualization of women or the risque manner that the guys were acting in. You can't just point at WWF and say, yeah, all your fault. That was the 90s culture. That was driven by Baywatch. That was driven by Jerry Springer. That was just so many things about the 90s culture. South Park. Was South Park too much in the 90s? Probably. That's why it succeeded.
Yeah. That's just what everybody...
like I said before, I'm not saying any of that stuff's right. We're living in 2025 now. Obviously, you can barely do any of the stuff that was around in the 90s anymore.
Yeah, I guess the things they talked about in the documentary is why they questioned what was too much is because obviously they were saying they were still appealing to kids at the time, but they were doing all this stuff that only appeases to adult males.
Like, I'd say we're the closest to the Attitude Era right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Than the WWE has been since the Ruthless Aggression Era. And I think that comes from a standpoint of they're on Netflix, so they can be unrated if they choose to be.
Yep.
I think you're seeing a lot more cursing.
Oh, yeah.
Which, probably more cursing than there was in the Attitude Era, actually. Attitude Era was really more just about the sex scaling, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and they're not going to do that.
The 90s could be summarized as sex sells, if we're being honest with each other. That's what that was. But, how much cursing was there? I mean, ass, damn, hell. What Triple H used to say, ass, damn, hell, and bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, then that gets said, but then he'd go on to be, we never use the words, F.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. Now they're saying that, too. It's like, okay.
Right. Yeah, the Attitude Era, I don't think definitely was too much, because, again, that was the culture. But I guess it's a nice conversation to have. But the business was booming at the time. But it leads us to episode 4, which is called not episode 4, episode 5, which is called Family Business. And I think you can see what this episode's going to be about. So this kind of talks about how Stephanie McMahon and Shane McMahon got into the business. Shane McMahon mentioned, that he loved the business ever since he was younger. And it wasn't like the same love that Vince had where he just wanted to do it. Like Shane actually wanted to not just do it, but he wanted to be a part of it type of thing. He actually went to wrestling school, and he went to MMA school and everything like that. He wanted to be.
You can see in his training.
Yeah. And
if you've ever seen Shane McMahon perform live, you can see he is well trained.
Yeah. And he went to he wanted to be a character on TV. He obviously started off, he did all various types of jobs, kind of like Vince did when he started, because Vince didn't want his children to just be given a platform right away. He wanted them to earn it. So Shane McMahon did a ton of odd jobs. He did refereeing, timekeeper. He was a photographer. He worked behind the scenes. And then eventually he became a character on TV. Stephanie McMahon, I think I'm just guessing here. I think she had it easier into the business, it seemed like, than Shane did. I think Shane had to work a little harder for it. And they're going to talk about that in this episode, but I think it seemed like Stephanie McMahon had an easier end of the business than Shane did. I think Shane really had to work his way in. I'm not saying that Steph didn't have to work her way in, but I think Steph had an easier path.
I think that probably just comes from how Vince was raised. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
His dad was hard on him, and it helped him get into the business. Vince was tough on Shane, and it helped him into the business. But he had a daughter. Vince didn't have a sister, so he probably looked at that. I was like, okay, she can work backstage. I can definitely set her up with that, because that's what she was always set up for, and did well. But she also, probably saw what Vince was doing, saw what Shane was doing, and that's what led her to be like, well, I can do it too. I don't care what anyone ever says about the McMahons putting themselves out there too much. Prior to the Authority era, them showing up was always a treat.
Yeah, definitely.
The only one that really sucked was Linda.
What they talk about in this episode. The cold open I forgot to mention here was more about Vince's past. He talked about there was other things kind of going on in his past, his mom was kind of probably doing some things. They mentioned his mom potentially was sexually assaulting him, which is kind of insane to think about, because
yeah.
But that doesn't. I'm not saying it doesn't add up, but that could be because we never really hear about Vince's mom all that much. I mean, he never talks about her. He only talks about his dad, so maybe there's something to that. Or maybe he just likes to keep his mom's life private. It's obviously tough to tell what the case is. But yeah, so Stephanie McMahon kind of talks about her going to the business. She mentioned that she would have to do a bunch of wild things. And yeah, they do a nice little montage in the documentary of all the things that Stephanie McMahon did. And it's kind of hard to believe she did all that stuff. And she took it like a champ type of thing, I guess.
Well, she took one of them a little too literally, which was, of course, being knocked out and married to Triple H.
Yep. And it's
that is still one of the funniest things of all time. And I always try to remind people, they did that whole thing, the Test Stephanie wedding in Boston. And the reason I'm always reminded of it is because John Cena always says he went to that show and was in the crowd for it. And he always says, like, when Triple H came out, he's supposed to be the bad guy. Like, he says when everyone saw him, like, everyone started piecing it together before it played. And they were like, oh, geez, he's going to show something that he married her. And then he says, like, the whole place was laughing their ass off during the sketch. And then, you know, they're trying to make you feel bad for Stephanie, but everyone's going absolutely crazy for Triple H.
But the biggest thing about this is, I didn't know, was because Steph had been a character and they were doing the thing with Tess. They didn't have a plan of what was going to come of it. It's kind of interesting to think that that was all Triple H's idea, which ends up kind of being a big thing, you know, because Triple H ends up dating Stephanie McMahon kind of out of that. So essentially, Triple H's creative vision is what got him the business all along type of thing, if you think about it. Like, type.
Yeah. On that note, we will have to do a China documentary review at some point.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know.
The A&E one probably, which is that's the only one I know we can do, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, you know, they kind of talk about how Stephanie McMahon and Triple H ended up dating. It's kind of funny because Vince mentions he's the one, he was kind of the one really pushing for Stephanie McMahon to hook up with Triple H and everything like that. You know, he kind of thought Triple H was going to be, like, you know, a good person for her to date and everything like that, which is kind of funny to think about. In hindsight, that, you know, because typically, I think everyone used to think the story was that Vince kind of tried to get Stephanie not to date the wrestlers, when it was the complete opposite. Vince kind of wanted Stephanie to date in the business type of thing. You know, which I guess this, which is kind of weird, but you know, it's not like Vince, like, you know, was you know, advertising stuff to the wrestlers type of thing. I think Vince was just more pushing for it and all that type of stuff. So it's just kind of interesting how that happens. I guess even though the Owen Hart stuff isn't anything new, what was good is you got to hear Vince, you know, a lot of this, because you haven't really heard Vince talk about a lot of this stuff before, so it's good that you get to hear Vince's take on some of this stuff. Yeah. It's an interesting take, but it's his take. So then, you know, then it talks about the company going public. You know, the company obviously wasn't a publicly traded company. In 2000, they became a public company. You know, obviously they wanted to do this so that way they can get more sponsorships and they can reach more homes and, you know, become more of a profitable company and everything like that. And this allowed them to kind of do other business ventures, which allowed WWF New York to get started up. And allowed other business ventures to kind of start up and, you know, in this... I mean, not the XFL, but there was other stuff that they did. I forget it exactly off the top of my head. But WWF New York was the biggest one that I can think of. And then during this time, WCW is not doing too well. You know, pretty much, obviously, this is where WCW just really goes off the rails, and everyone just kind of knows, like, WWF isn't competing with them anymore. They're not really trying anymore. They wonder what the hell WCW was doing. That would be a video for another day. And then eventually WWF buys WCW. You know, Vince bought it. They talk about how much of a secret this was. You know, all it was just a few phone calls and everything like that. And Vince celebrated really highly when he bought WCW. And obviously, you know, eventually... you know, they did the Somo cast, and they talk about how much of a huge moment that was. But then they kind of talk about, you know, when WCW left, it kind of was the end of an era because they didn't really have that competition anymore, and it kind of affected their product because they don't have something to fight for. So Vince kind of focused his time and did other business ventures, which was the XFL, which ended up being a disaster. Talking about how the first episode was really good for the season, but obviously it just didn't really match up with what everybody wanted for football and everything like that. And
well, at least we got the He Hate Me jersey out of it.
The what?
There's a guy who had He Hate Me on his jersey.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And, it led to that interview where Vince McMahon, I think the interview was on a good portion of the, documentary where he mentions that, him and Vince had like an interview talking about the XFL, and the guy came at him pretty hard, and Vince kind of fired back at him and everything like that, and that kind of hurt his perception a little bit. And they talk about all these business ventures that just kind of end up going out of business, like, WWF New York went out of business, the XFL went out of business. There was other business ventures that happened that ended up going out of business. I don't remember what they were, though, but they were other things. But Vince just kept plugging along. He never let these business ventures defeat him. He would just kind of move on and kind of come back to the show the next day. But, there was other things that were kind of not going well for Vince McMahon at this time. They get the F out movement kind of have to start happening. And obviously, if we ever review the Ruthless Aggression era, I haven't seen the series, but I hear they fibbed that story originally in that documentary series, but here they had to tell the real story. So they ended up obviously having to change the name from WWF to WWE because the World Wildlife Federation obviously was a thing, and I think they had an agreement where they would, obviously not release WWF like logo merchandise stuff and everything like that. And obviously Vince broke that agreement, and Vince obviously, got sent like a thing where, like a cease and desist pretty much saying like, no, you got to change the name. So Vince had to change the name. And during this time, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock are on the outs. The Rock was becoming big in Hollywood around this time, and he wanted to pursue acting. And Stone Cold Steve Austin, obviously, they talk about the infamous moment where he walked out and he was just getting burnt out on the product and the creative and everything like that. So Vince kind of had to take the business in a new direction, and he had to bring in the Ruthless Aggression era. And the Ruthless Aggression era is kind of like, them kind of being more realistic and focusing more on like that athletics and talking about the personalities more and everything like that, and this kind of brings in the rise of John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, and other people. John Cena, they talk about how him and Vince really, Vince really didn't think much of John Cena originally. Cena mentioned he was going to get fired and be a part of like the November round cuts. But then he started rapping on the bus, and Stephanie McMahon heard of it. And this kind of caught John Cena's career going. And Cena talked about how he learned a lot from Vince McMahon. He learned how to take opportunities and just make the most out of them, and how to be your true authentic self, just kicked up 10 notches and everything like that, and just never accept failure and all that type of stuff. And a lot of episode 5 is kind of talking about Vince versus Shane. Obviously Vince and Shane weren't seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. So Shane McMahon kind of wanted to do some things, but Vince just wasn't having it. I think originally Shane had different ideas of what he wanted to do with WCW when Vince bought it, but Vince wasn't having it. Shane McMahon, when UFC needed someone to buy it, Shane wanted to buy UFC and do something with it, but Vince didn't have any interest in it because he just wasn't digging UFC's product at the time and everything like that. And then when it did get bought, obviously it became bigger than the WWE and everything like that. And Vince, Shane kind of said, "I told you so." And Shane had storyline ideas, and they talk about how Vince was very cool. Not, I shouldn't say cool, but he kind of he was more bold on his kids' ideas, and he challenged them more than the other people that worked for him. He wanted them to feel like they really had to earn their spot and everything like that. So it eventually led to Shane McMahon parted ways with WWE, and he wanted to go out and make it on his own. And then the rest of the episode is kind of about those people that have made peace with Vince McMahon. You know, all these people had went on good terms with Vince McMahon, and the first kind of big one to kind of make peace with them was Hulk Hogan. They talk about the WrestleMania 18th, and then Hogan said to him when he came back, because this was after like the steroid trial, the NWO going to WCW. Him and Vince didn't really talk about it all that much. They just kind of moved on and did business together, just made a lot of money. Same thing with Eric Bischoff. When he brought in Eric Bischoff, they just kind of moved on and made money. When Stone Cold Steve Austin came back after walking out, they just kind of moved on and made money. And Vince McMahon says, you know, he doesn't hold grudges. Like, these things happen and he still has those feelings about it. But if he can make money with someone, he's going to do just that. He's going to make money with them, whether he had you on the outs with him or not. That's why there was always that thing where you say never with Vince McMahon, you know, because everyone always comes back at some point. They talk about, I mean, the biggest one I missed was Bret Hart. You know, Bret Hart, him and Vince were on the outs for a long time, and he ended up coming back. You know, that was kind of all of episode 5. The biggest thing I missed is obviously, they actually, I didn't think they were going to talk about it, that Vince wanted to do the, you know, incest storyline with him and Stephanie McMahon and everything like that. I didn't think they were going to bring it up, but they did. That was kind of episode 5. I liked episode 5. I kind of thought this was kind of, you got to kind of see that this was becoming like a family business and everything like that, and you got to kind of hear like how everyone kind of contributed to the business, everything like that. Overall, what'd you kind of think of episode 5?
I liked it a lot because that's around the time I really started getting into wrestling, the early 2000s, especially the Ruthless Aggression era. Yeah, obviously I think had Vince listened to Shane a little more during that period of time, I think WWE would have rode a much bigger hot streak than they wound up. That's not to say they didn't have a lot going for them. I think we're going to get to something that happens in episode 6 that really halts the momentum of Ruthless Aggression and ends it.
Yeah.
But it's not only, you know, like he wanted to buy UFC. If that had happened, I mean, that would have been massive. I'd imagine, you know, Shane could have run that. Vince could have run WWE. That would have been a great coalition. Obviously, that's kind of what they're at nowadays with TKO. But not only that, you know, people forget is when ECW came back in 06. Excuse me. When they came back in 06, Shane's idea was, okay, well, let's be real. Like, ECW isn't going to have a place on TV anymore because the culture has changed. You know, we're not going to be able to do ECW, but if we stream it on WWE.com for a premium fee, then it can be ECW as much as it wants to be because it's not on TV. It's streaming, unrated. He wanted to do that. Paul Heyman thought it was a great idea. And Vince said, no, I don't see the novelty in streaming. Vince, like Blockbuster, made a very poor decision when it came to streaming now, didn't they?
Well, it's kind of funny, too, because this is what ends up happening with NXT later on and everything like that.
Yeah.
So,
you kind of think if ECW was on WWE.com and it was like, yeah, pay $5 a month and you get a month's worth of ECW, like, that would have been crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, episode 5 I liked. But yeah, it leads to the finale, which is you're gonna take. I feel bad for you because you got to take probably the worst part of. You've had to take the worst part of both documentaries. So the finale of the documentary.
Yeah. I'm gonna say you can do the cold open because I do not remember it, but from there I'll.
I kind of talked about that already. That was when Vince is being interviewed, and he gets he mentions all that brain things.
Oh, that's when he leaves, right? Yeah. So obviously episode 6, the finish. They had to make it a fucking sexual term, didn't they?
No, it's the finale, I thought. But I guess it's the finish.
I have it called the finish.
Oh, okay. So maybe...
Of course, it's called the finish. I mean, I know that's what they say in wrestling, but also because we've been talking about what the 90s was. I'll get... Steve Steiner has to get his head out of the gutter, sorry.
Well, I can't blame you for where you're about to go, so...
So WrestleMania 23, obviously... Mr. Number 47 himself, President Trump versus Vince McMahon, the Battle of the Billionaires.
Yeah.
We are recording this the day before the inauguration tomorrow, actually.
Oh, so there you go. There you go. Kind of a good timing, I guess.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let the record show the only man to have ever Stone Cold Stunnered a U.S. president is Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. He's the only man that's been able to get away with it. But besides that, yeah, they did the Battle of the Billionaires. Bobby Lashley representing Donald Trump and Umaga representing Vince McMahon. They have that match. Trump and Lashley win. They put Vince in the barber chair and they shave him bald. And before I get to where this leads to, I do just want to point out Vince, when he got shaved, was probably one of the best incarnations of the Mr. McMahon character, where he just went off the rails.
Yeah.
Yeah, started wearing the do-rag, the fedora, acting like he was a gangsta.
I remember that segment. I remember that segment he does with John Cena.
Booker T. I'm not gonna say that.
Well, I was
just, you know.
I was gonna say John Cena and Shawn Michaels backstage, like after he won the ECW championship. That was a good one too.
Oh yeah, he does now. I was thinking about the one where I can't tell if it was Do-Rag Vince or it was before that, where he walked up to Cena and he said something that starts with an N, and Booker T was standing right next to him.
Yeah, that's pre-Do-Rag, because that was when Cena was had just won the belt.
Yeah, that's right. Still, Vince. But Do-Rag Vince was just a menace to society in the best way possible. Him obviously won the ECW championship, which is a polarizing thing. Most people hated it. I think for what it was actually very enjoyable to watch, because he did exactly what he should do in that situation. He acted like he had no business being the champion, and that he was a madman, and he dropped it right back to him anyway. And besides, it was Bobby Lashley he won it from. So it's like, he's not even a real ECW. No offense to Lashley. Not a real ECW guy.
To be fair, I mean, I know I've ranted about that before, and maybe it's still not a great decision, but everyone says that's the moment that ECW died when Vince won the title. I'm pretty sure the ECW brand had died at December to Dismember, which was not long before that.
Yeah.
So
no disrespect to Lashley, but when he won the belt, actually, I might even go as far as to say when Big Show won.
Probably. To be fair, though, that was kind of they had no choice but to do that because of what happened before that. So they had to get the title on them. They had to get the title on somebody immediately.
The knife went in when Big Show won, and the knife came out when Lashley won.
Probably, yeah.
Anyhow, this leads to McMahon Appreciation Night, where Vince feels underappreciated. He's walking backstage. Yes, I'll point it out. Paul London. How can you not point it out?
I love that it was. I love that they kept that in the doc. I thought they'd edit that out, but that was in the doc. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, what? I look back on that, and for the record, no, I don't blame Vince or anyone backstage for being mad at him for doing that. Like, you're the only one doing it, you idiot.
I don't know what he was thinking.
Yeah, he must have found the remaining pieces of RVD's stash.
Potentially.
Anyhow, Vince gets to his limo and closes the door, and boom, limo explodes. There goes Vince.
To the point where Donald Trump thought that was real.
and called him to make sure it was fake, which obviously Vince was like, yeah, I'm fine. But people in the audience thought it was real, and they called 911.
Were you one of them, Steve?
I was not. I was. I watched that live. I remember. I was like, I was standing up, getting ready to walk to my room because I'm like, he's just gonna get in the limo and drive away. As I'm turning, I just hear, boom. I'm like, oh shit!
Did John?
My brother was like.
Did John ever tell you he had that on tape and like it cuts out like right when he gets into the limousine or something like that? Like
it's just
yeah.
Oh man. I remember watching it and for what it was, I've read all the stuff saying, that storyline was gonna link into Vince being killed off, and then they would have eventually brought up the illegitimate son angle, and that would have been Mr. Kennedy and all that. Story for, I said it before, story for another day. We can always talk about that later.
Well, we have to talk about it later, pretty soon.
Yeah, so that storyline gets cut, though, because later on that week, and once again, there will be a Dark Side of the Ring review of this. Chris Benoit, the double murder-suicide happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it raises the questions of steroid abuse again. When it initially happened, obviously WWE did the tribute to Benoit on Monday Night Raw. I'll say this right now, I don't bear any ill will or grudge against Vince for that. I don't think they knew what was going on at that point. They just knew it was under investigation.
Yeah.
And I don't think they had like anyone else, they're close to him, they're co-workers obviously, but they're still civilians. They're not privy to the information of the details of the investigation. They just know that they were found dead.
Yeah.
For all they know, it could have been freaking carbon monoxide poisoning.
They also mentioned like they didn't even know that like what actually happened until like that show was being like broadcast and everything like that too. So like doing that type of thing. So
yeah, they found out while it was broadcasting, and obviously I think it made. Honestly, you're not going to cut in the middle of Raw because then you have product placement issues and whatnot. But
yeah,
and like that could come back to the show must go on argument, but I don't know if it really does, because as you're finding all this out, once again, you're probably in that mind space of you're not thinking about cutting your show. You're just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And it's if you watch the Dark Side of the Ring, Chris Jericho says he thinks Regal knew that there was some foul play involved because he was close with him for many years, and he was just kind of adding up the pieces because he knew he had some problems going on with Eddie passing away.
Right.
And if you watch Regal's interview during that episode, he kind of says like, I'm not going to talk about him as a man. I'm just going to say he was really a good wrestler to work with. And it's like, that's an odd thing to say, but okay.
We'll have to talk about that someday. But yeah, you could totally understand why Vince had to come back anyways, even if the Chris Benoit stuff had come out type of thing, because so you don't want to do a storyline where someone died in real life and then have a storyline where someone died in kayfabe. Then you're kind of like, it's only the best timing for that type of thing. So you can.
And obviously, steroid abuse comes up as a subject during this. Chris Nowinski examines Benoit's brain and confirms CTE. To give you an idea of how bad it was, I've actually read the report myself.
How did you get the report?
Well, not like read the official report, but the main findings of it, like the actual finite details of it. So Benoit's brain, when he died, was equivalent to a 90-year-old male patient with dementia.
Yeah, that's how bad it was.
That's how bad his brain was. That is horrifying. That's how bad it was. And obviously this leads...
The best way to describe it is if you watch his matches like in 2004 compared to what he's like in 2007, you could just tell he's not all there like in 2007 as much anymore.
05, 07, yeah. And I think if you ask anyone when did the ruthless aggression era die, I think they'll tell you when Chris Benoit double murder suicide happened.
Yeah.
So obviously that happens, and then it creates a domino effect. You know, ruthless aggression really gets toned down. They're moving away from PG-13.
Mm-hmm.
Chair shots are banned to the head. All weapon shots are really banned. They initiate the new drug policy, the wellness policy as it's more commonly known. And then outside of that, they're obviously doing a lot to tone down the violence and become PG, which they inevitably would. And, you know, obviously, if you look at, like, eras like Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression Era, there's always, like, that in-between period. I think the in-between period is from that moment till, like, WrestleMania 24.
I agree.
And then after that, the most violent thing you had was Orton kicking people in the head.
I think the biggest thing that came out of this, though, was like Christopher Nowinski was kind of like trying to get people to believe in CT and all that type of stuff. And like he was having battles and stuff with like NFL and all that stuff. And the company that like that like contacted him to get like knowledge about it was WWE, which I think is pretty interesting type of thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think I will applaud Vince and the WWE for, you know, once they saw the findings, you know, they immediately went, whoa, okay, like, I knew concussions were an issue, but, you know, CT and all this, okay, well, no more chair shots to the head. You know, they moved on it pretty quick. I will, as much as I love football, I will no doubt say that the NFL were assholes when it came to CT for the longest time.
Yeah.
And I'm just typing this up right now because I'm trying to remember who in 2007 got suspended for wellness policy violations, because obviously it came out.
Yeah.
And everybody was.
It's a lot of people. Obviously, the biggest one was Mr. Kennedy because he lost the illegitimate son angle out of that.
Yeah, everybody was kind of shocked by it. I don't think everybody took the wellness policy seriously at first, but obviously, Signature Pharmacy scandal occurred as a result of the wellness policy, and everybody got suspended for it. I have the list right here. So, Umaga.
Yeah, I remember that. He was gone for a while.
William Regal got suspended for 30 days. Was that when he got fired from the Raw GM position? I think so.
No, because
no,
2008 when he got the Raw GM position. So,
right.
But he did get suspended. I can understand why he'd be confused because it did happen to him in 2008 too. So, wow, that I didn't realize it was back to back. Essentially, it was not long after that. So.
Chris Masters got suspended.
Yep.
Snitsky. Chavo Guerrero got suspended for 60 days because I guess he did something else, but not disclosed.
Yeah.
Booker T got suspended for 60 days and would actually leave.
Yep.
In the middle of his suspension for TNA.
I'm kind of shocked he didn't really. I mean, I guess though maybe they didn't want to use the Vince talk for that because he shows up in the Vince talk. I thought he would have mentioned it.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember 2007 Booker T. He basically wrestled Triple H at SummerSlam, the Battle of the Kings, King Booker versus King of Kings Triple H, and I think he had a Raw match, and that was it.
I remember he faces Cena the next. I remember he faces Cena the next night because I was at that. That was my first Raw I ever went to. So
okay, I was there too actually.
We didn't know each other. I mean, I was way up high in the last row of the place.
Same here, bro.
So
I was up high.
Wow, so we probably saw each other and didn't even know about it, type of thing. So
it's like Drake and Josh. You stole the phone thing.
Yeah, I guarantee you did something to me.
Charlie Haas got suspended.
Yeah.
Ed got suspended.
But I think he was out due to injury at that time anyways.
Was he? I'll double check that.
Yeah,
because he got suspended.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah. Gregory Helms got suspended. John Morrison and Mr. Kennedy, obviously.
John Morrison? That's kind of... Oh yeah, because he lost the ECW title though at that time.
Yep.
It was after Morrison.
Yes. Yeah,
It was Morrison and
it
who?
was John Morrison at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he stepped in for Benoit when
Yep.
Punk was supposed to beat him, and they were like, actually, you know what, Morrison, you're gonna win. You're gonna beat Punk.
Yep.
More power to him. Oh, let's see. I'm looking for when he got suspended. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I know I'm going a little off topic here, but I do want to get us an answer.
Why not?
Yep, he was out with injury at that point.
But so I'm pretty sure he just served it while he was injured. His suspension.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's legal, but it happened. I'm pretty sure Randy Orton. I'm pretty sure Randy
He came back.
Yeah.
Attacked Batista and Undertaker during their match.
I'm pretty sure Randy Orton was supposed to get suspended at that time, but there wasn't any evidence he failed the wellness policy. So.
No, I remember what that was, because he had already been suspended enough times that because they just launched the wellness policy, if he got that third suspension, he would have been fired. So they kind of looked at it from an angle of, okay, this wasn't in effect before.
Yeah.
But the way it works is it's not like, all right, starting now, it's everything that's happened since it's been back to back to back still counts. So you are getting a slap in the face, not a slap on the wrist. Don't do it again.
But I hear though, they've altered the rule around so that way they didn't have, because I think Randy Orton, if you probably count up his suspensions, he should have been suspended, not just suspended but fired, because he's already at, reached his third strike, but they find loopholes around it so they don't have to fire him because they want to keep him around type of thing. So, but yeah,
and obviously in the wake of the Benoit stuff that happened, all this stuff happens. WWE becomes PG. The violence is getting toned down. Notably, the chair shots to the head. The drug policy goes into effect and is still in effect to this day. I think it's been reworked a little bit because it was a no exceptions policy, but there are some things like Roman Reigns has to take for his health because, as we've come to learn, he's a little bit of a medical nightmare.
Right. That's why he doesn't. That's why he's on a part-time schedule, like he is, kind of. So.
Yeah, exactly. But moving away from that stuff, we kind of move pretty far down the timeline at that point. They start talking about Triple H and Stephanie getting more involved, as well as Shane's return in 2016. The WWE Network launches in 2014, and then would eventually move to Peacock. And obviously, I think the big player out of those three, Triple H, Stephanie, and Shane, in the early 2010s to late 2010s, probably Stephanie, because she saw that, okay, you know what, there's really not much more we can do to boost our male roster, but we can boost the female roster pretty decently, so let's try that. And obviously that led to the Women's Revolution, where she called up a ton of NXT talent. Charlotte, Sasha, Bayley not at first. Becky.
Yep. I will say one thing I don't like about this.
Give him the world is your oyster approach. Make the best of it.
Yeah. One thing I didn't like about this though, because the big thing is the fight between who is actually better to run the company, Stephanie or Shane. They kind of make it sound like that Triple H and Stephanie kind of don't know what they're doing type of thing. Like Shane would be better overall, which it kind of ignores the impact that Triple H and Stephanie did Triple H's impact with NXT. They didn't really touch on that too much. It kind of made it look like that they weren't doing well, until Shane came back, type of thing, which is kind of weird. So,
I think, I don't know. Shane really hasn't had a chance to run anything. Triple H has that experience, so it makes much more sense. But that's not to say I wouldn't like to see Shane get a shot to finally do something if he wants to.
Yeah, I'm just saying the documentary made it look like it's that Triple H and stuff
Yeah.
didn't know what they were doing when it happened. So, like,
Right, and it really seems like after that first half of stuff we talked about with Benoit, they really start kind of firing on all cylinders, moving through time, getting up to everything, and then we get to June 2022. Yep, we all remember this time period. I remember. I think we can just both talk about it really quick. Obviously Vince, pretty much up until this point, if you want to look at him from a booking standpoint, phenomenal. Sure, he has hiccups. Too many to count. But WWE, in terms of a lot of the storylines Vince was calling the shots for, it was great. I would say around, I'd say WrestleMania 30 was around the time period, 2014, where we started seeing problems with Vince's direction he wanted to take the company in.
Yeah, definitely. You could definitely tell you was out of touch.
I think, I had always growing up had, there'd be stuff I didn't like that happened, but down the line I'd agree with it. Yeah, WrestleMania 30 was where issues started for me. Or even a little bit before that, the Rumble, obviously, Punk leaves.
Yep.
And, Vince really didn't do himself any favors trying to fix that situation.
Not at all.
I think Vince should have put his foot down with Undertaker and Brock a little more and said, no, that's stupid. We're not having Brock Lesnar beat you.
I'm pretty sure in the doc, though, they mentioned Taker was supposed to win, but Vince last-minute decision went in and said, he's winning now. Like, he changed his mind the last minute type of thing. I
can't remember if it was Vince's, but this is a bad decision. I still don't agree with it to this day.
That's fair.
And then obviously from there we move into the Roman Reigns era of trying to make him the knight in shining armor, which I loved Roman Reigns. I've always been a fan of his work, but he was not the popular choice. I think when he was in the Shield, he was highly valued because, he was just the brute of the Shield, and that's what everybody liked. And then he moved on to his own, and it was just so obvious that he was kind of being groomed, and, he didn't have the surprise factor. He didn't really have amazing mic skills. I never agreed with people saying his wrestling wasn't that great. I think Roman Reigns has always been on a bad day, decent.
Right. I can't think of like a bad match that he's probably had off the top of my head. He's probably had some. Everyone has a bad match.
I mean, I remember I actually just listened to Chris Van Fleet's interview with Seth Rollins when he was Mr. Money in the Bank, and I guess Vince told him, I'm letting you know right now, when you cash it in, you will win, but I don't have a plan for you when that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So make sure it's a good one so you don't look stupid. And basically, when he won it, he said, okay, well, I'm definitely going to try to give myself time, so not this year. He knew enough to wait, and then he did the Rumble match with Cena and Lesnar. He was like, it was pretty good. Crowd was into me. Even though I'm the bad guy, they were still pretty into me. And then once he saw the main event, he was like, oh, dear. This could be an issue. And they're like, oh, maybe it's not a problem.
Right.
I can fix this. And he went to Vince the night of the Royal Rumble because Vince was pissed, saw the issue, and he goes, hey, I have an idea. And Vince was like, yeah, that's probably what we're going to have to do.
The biggest
thing
it
was not a surprise to Brock or Roman. They went into that program knowing Seth is going to run his program with Orton, but the end is he wins the belt, and that's how we're going to do it, and that's how we're going to run it. But obviously Vince just, even after that, he kept chugging forward with Roman so hard.
I mean, the biggest thing you left out why he didn't, why also It's because they obviously made the stupid decision and brought back Daniel Bryan and put him in the Rumble match where everyone expected he was going to. Not really expected that Bryan was going to win, but just putting Bryan in that Rumble match was a big mistake, and especially too with how he got eliminated and everything like that. That was a big mistake.
Yeah, it was insanely stupid.
Yeah.
Very poor decision making, but
I mean, I think you have your stance because I felt the fans probably felt about Bryan, but the fact that Bryan was even in that Rumble match at all shouldn't have even happened.
Yeah, they made some poor decisions with Daniel Bryan too. That didn't help Roman's case.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of going year by year now. I'm not trying to drag it on too far, but he's still pushing Roman. Seth gets hurt. Roman wins the belt, and it actually does work for a little bit, but it only works on account of nobody wanted Sheamus to be champion.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of made Reigns look a little bit like his badass self.
Yep.
And then they went right back to making him super babyface. So it was clear that WWE would do whatever they could to get him over, but in the end, have it be Vince's vision and no one else's. So now I think that's the point where people probably started letting up on Roman, which should be a good thing, but it wasn't, because then they're like, it's Vince's fault. It's the whole company. Fuck him. And that's when I think people started really tuning out, probably.
Yeah, definitely.
And because then you have him beating Undertaker at WrestleMania 33, which, just saying, if the streak was still a thing there, would have been a great opportunity to turn him into a big-time heel, but whatever. It didn't happen. 34 happens, and Roman is still just not. It felt like he was stuck in time. He's just not getting over.
Yeah, and
then he finally wins the belt at
SummerSlam,
and I know this is going to sound horrible. It took a life-threatening disease for him to get over when he came out and had to drop the belt.
And this is going to sound horrible. It was to the point where, like, a lot of people think that, like, WWE made up that disease, that he had that, because it just came out at a weird time, you know, type of thing.
It did, and it happens. And obviously the real issue coming out of that was the whole Dean Ambrose turn, but
yeah,
that's beside the point.
And Raw at that time too, and like was just a mess at that point, like type of thing.
Raw and SmackDown, yeah. NXT was the beacon of hope in WWE for such a long period of time. And then we get to, then Roman comes back, and I'd say from 35 onward, he was fine. He was over.
Yeah, he's fairly over. I don't think he ever got like
because
the hate
I think people were just so relieved for him to be healthy, and he wasn't being shoved down people's throats anymore. They're like, we're going to push him as a main eventer away from the title scene. And, he started being able to build his character a little more. And it would ultimately be him kind of showing the hints of a heel turn, which would finally happen, and the rest is history, as they say. But
Chris and I talked about this. This is off topic, but do you think if the pandemic didn't have... Because Chris and I mentioned this in the Rumble 2020 retro. I think because if the pandemic doesn't happen, Roman Reigns doesn't take time off to contemplate retirement to the point where he's like, I'm going to be the tribal chief now. Do you think if the pandemic doesn't happen, the tribal chief doesn't happen?
No. For the record, we do need to do we need to bring back Wrestling What Ifs, and we just need to do straight up simple question: what if the pandemic didn't happen from a wrestling standpoint? Obviously, we can answer a million questions on what if the pandemic didn't happen, but we just focus on the wrestling aspect of it.
Right, yeah.
Have a field day, I'm sure. Probably book years of it. But if the pandemic hadn't happened, we would have gotten the Goldberg-Roman match, which I think Roman would have easily been over in, because people were pissed at Goldberg about the Fiend. But Roman also might have got a little heat, probably, because it would have been kind of like Daniel Bryan. They wanted the Fiend.
Yeah.
They weren't getting that. They were getting the Fiend and Cena, which is fine. But that also means we wouldn't have gotten the Firefly Funhouse match.
Yep.
If the pandemic didn't happen, WrestleMania 36 That would have sucked. It could have really sucked.
Hey, if the pandemic...
Minus Drew winning.
Well, who's to say Drew would have won, too? Because the whole reason Drew had to
minus
win...
Drew winning the belt, WrestleMania 36 could have not been fantastic in retrospect.
I mean, if you think about it, if the pandemic didn't happen, we don't have 2-night Manias right now, too, probably. I think
that's also... I think we would have gotten there by this point regardless, because I think they would have just looked at the Wrestle Kingdom format and been like, yeah, you know what, that works. It works over there. There's no reason it won't work over here.
That's true. I'm pretty sure, didn't Wrestle Kingdom start doing the 2-night format, though, because of the pandemic? I'm pretty sure it was...
No, Wrestle Kingdom was 2 nights for a few years prior to it, I think.
Okay.
But I think pandemic didn't hit. Roman probably beats Goldberg, but is probably in a very bipolar position because he's not the Fiend, but at the same time he beat Goldberg, so they got that shit done with.
So does it become the Tribal Chief, though, or do you think he still is the big dog to this day?
I can't say for certain, but I would like to think history probably would have stayed the same in terms of him turning heel at SummerSlam.
Okay, that's a good question.
I don't know if Paul Heyman would have been involved, but I think he still could have turned heel.
But we'll see.
But yeah, back on track with Vince though. It really wasn't until coming, the pandemic that Vince's booking kind of changed a little bit, I'd say. With, the Tribal Chief finally happening and him letting Bray Wyatt be more expressive, although he kind of fucked that up.
Big time.
Vince started to get but unfortunately, I don't think that was Vince becoming a better booker. I think that was Vince getting older and probably being a little more hands-off.
Right.
And then, obviously, 2022 rolls around, and from a booking standpoint, Vince was actually doing pretty well.
Yeah, I thought so.
He convinced Cody to leave AEW and come back.
Yeah.
Main event was the main event of 38. He had Roman versus Brock in the main event, and he made Roman look like the star he always wanted him to, just with the twist of if I can't make him the best good guy, I'm going to make him the greatest villain. And
he did that very well.
He did it. Yeah, he did it extremely well. Vince was on fire, and then obviously, bang, all this stuff comes out about the sexual misconduct, the sex trafficking, and I think he stayed on the board of directors for a period of time in 2022. I'm trying to remember. I think, if memory serves me correct, I will say this. The big issue that Vince was running into, though, was Raw and SmackDown. He was doing fine, but he was also trying to take over NXT, and that was a problem.
Yep.
He had no business doing it, and he had no idea what he was doing.
I think the circumstances around it...
I was like talking to myself, like, I'm forgetting he fucked something up. Oh, yeah. The paint can.
And I think the circumstances around it was... Because Triple H had his health issues, like, right roughly that time, and he kind of...
That's true. So I can't hark on it too much, I guess, from that aspect, but still.
Well, I'm just saying that because Vince had been trying to get his fingerprints on NXT for a while, and then it took Triple H's health issues finally happening, where he was like, yep, now I'm going to change this, and you can't do anything about it, type of thing. That's
true. That's such a jerk move.
And like Vince says, he doesn't fight fair, so, so.
But he stays on the board, and then, think once everything is out and about and it's pretty well known, he stepped in. So yeah, he stayed on the board so he'd get paid, but he did step away from creative.
Yes.
In 2022, and that's when Triple H came back in. And I remember SummerSlam 2022 was absolute insanity with all the stuff they were able to pull off, because now
That
Triple H
was
is in charge.
that was his
He was
first
able to
show.
bring, yeah, and he created Damage Control, which is still, it's gone through its incarnations, but still riding hot.
Mm-hmm.
What was the main event of that show?
That was the last. That's the first. He actually managed to get the best block in Roman match.
Was that 22 or 23?
That's 22. That's because that's the tractor thing. Because 23 is tribal combat.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I remember that match was awesome.
Yeah, block and Roman. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, that SummerSlam 2022 was like.
Bianca Belair beats Becky Lynch, and then we get Damage Control. Logan Paul.
Yep.
Putting on an absolute clinic out of scenic nowhere.
Yeah, no one expected it.
Bobby Lashley beating Theory. The Mysterios beating Judgment Day. And then, obviously, during that match, Triple H saw the writing on the wall that Dominic needed to turn heel.
Mm-hmm. He turned Judgment Day around too. Judgment Day, if Vince had stayed in power, I think Judgment Day would have been done by Clash of the Castle, probably. I think.
Yeah. The Usos beat the Profits. Liv Morgan beat Ronda Rousey.
That's the only bad
That's
thing.
probably the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish Chris were here right now because. But you know how they say you say Bloody Mary 3 times and Bloody Mary pops up in the mirror. You say Liv Morgan 3 times, Chris manifests and tells you everything wrong about Liv Morgan.
Yeah. Oh no, just Liv Morgan.
We'll get him on. We'll get him on here, and we'll have a dedicated special to all the things wrong with Liv Morgan's title reign.
Both. If you think about it, she's had a few title reigns that's been really bad. Actually, that one, and then the other one.
I'll say this: I'm happy that there are mid-card belts for the women's division because that is where I see Liv Morgan at.
Yeah.
Honest to God. Yeah, that was Roman Reigns versus Lesnar, where Lesnar went absolutely insane.
I almost thought it'd been his last match.
Oh, that was so good.
Yeah.
The tractor, him acting like a lunatic in the build-up to it.
That should have been his last match.
But then Triple H did that one, and then we get to 2023. Vince returns as chairman with Stephanie resigning as the co-CEO with Nick Khan, and he sells it to Endeavor, merging with UFC to form TKO. And I remember when that happened, the first guy who called me about it, when I was shocked when I saw him call me up to talk about it, was James.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
He calls me and he goes, "Did you hear?" And I'm like, "No." And he goes, "They finally sold to someone." I'm like, "Oh, who they sold?" It's like they sold to Endeavor. They're merging, and they sold to them because that's going to allow Vince to retain power from a creative standpoint over WWE. I'm like, and James, I remember I was like, "I'm not trying to be mean, dude, but I know you've always had your with WWE. Are you exaggerating?" He goes, "No, I swear. Look it up. I'm not exaggerating." I was driving. I was getting off the highway. I pull into a parking lot, look it up. I'm like, "Oh shit! Oh shit!
Yeah,
what's happening?"
I think though that was Vince's plan long term.
That was during that period of time. He looked like evil Walt Disney with the stupid mustache.
Yes, and they showed it in the doc, which was awesome.
And he looks so bad with that hair dye.
Yeah. But yeah, that was Vince's plan overall. I think Vince's plan was he was going to sell the company so he could stay in power and everything like that. But as you're going to talk about, that backfired on him big time.
Yep, and I remember thinking to myself, "Oh shit! Everything Triple H has worked for, everything Stephanie's worked for, because this isn't the old." I was like, "Oh, maybe we'll get the old Vince McMahon." I'm like, "Oh, get real! It's not going to happen." I was so bummed out.
Yeah.
And I think a week or two later, the board was like, "Yeah, you're a fucking idiot. Get out of here." Pretty much.
Vince did himself a disservice selling the company because he could have just stayed. If he didn't sell it,
And
he would have still been.
to any Spider-Man fans out there, I always envision that meeting being like the one they had with Norman Osborn, where they fire me like, "Yep, we expect your resignation Monday morning." What? No, you can't do this to me. You know how much I sacrificed. Sorry, Norman, you're out. I imagine Vince kind of being like that inner Green Goblin. Oh, am I? But that's pretty much how it seems it went down. Was the TKO board saw the fans being like, I don't know. Look at his track record, and they did. They're like, yeah, no, and then lo and behold, he gets booted, and now The Rock is in his place.
Well, you're missing the biggest thing. There's another big reason he got booted. I don't know if you're trying to leave out the.
Oh, right. More allegations came out.
Yeah.
The initial investigation comes out in 2022, and then it gets added to in 2024. And then, amidst all that, he resigns and he sells his shares of the stock.
Yep.
And he refuses to do any more interviews.
Yeah, he didn't show up for like that part out of the interviews. Like they had to tell us, like, because I think it's funny in that documentary, like when it cuts back to like when it's supposed to be Vince, it's just an empty chair. It's like, yeah, Vince canceled all of his interviews up to this point and everything like that. So,
yep.
I'm pretty sure. Didn't we? I think you talked. Did you talk about this on camera or off camera? That this was probably going on like as the. I think it was on camera, right? We talked about this.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure. But yeah, so yeah, they continue. They continue because there's more things, and then we've wrapped up this episode.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my notes for the actual stuff that's come out on them. Yeah, so
you're not gonna tell us, are you? This is so bad. Like,
what's up?
You're not gonna tell us what they are because it's really bad. I feel like that's when. It's not great.
A lot of terms. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of bad terms. Because, yeah, a lot of stuff came out about him. And I think recently some of them were dismissed. Yeah. I looked into that. Recently, some of the charges were dismissed, but not all of them. And obviously, whenever you hear something like this, you want to investigate it. If it turns out he's innocent, that's great. Really, from everyone's innocent until proven guilty. I try my best to believe that, but it does not look great for Vince.
If he was found innocent, though, do you think they bring him back if he was found innocent, or no?
Not in a producing role.
Well, definitely not.
Because here's the thing, and I always think of Enzo Amore as much of an idiot as he's kind of turned out to be, as everyone's kind of learned he is. I do feel bad for his situation because his stuff got, his situation of sexual misconduct turned out to be total BS.
Right.
Nothing happened at all.
Yeah.
But he was still fired and removed. The only reason he wasn't brought back was because obviously he handled it poorly. He turned out to be a dick.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think he told.
No one really wanted him back.
I don't think he told anyone either. That was the biggest thing either. So.
Yeah, that too. But yeah, that's kind of where the documentary ends, pretty much. With they do a recap on his legacy, obviously, but really in terms of details to be provided, it ends with all this stuff comes out. Now Vince is gone, and that's really how the series ends. And from here, do we think Vince is going to come back? I think if anything, if he's found guilty on anything, no. Period. I think if he settles out of court or is found not guilty, that once enough adequate time has passed away, it sucks to say it, it passes away, I'm sure there's a spot in the WWE Hall of Fame with his name on it.
I do have to ask you, though, because he has that company that he's trying to start up we don't really know what this company is. It's some type of entertainment company.
I'd heard that he's trying to start an entertainment company. I had heard that. Yeah.
So do you think he just focuses on that though? If the allegations like get cleared, he's not guilty, or do you think he actually comes back and does nothing with this entertainment company? Do you think this entertainment company that he's even? Do you think it's all just reports BS, or do you think he's actually genuinely trying to start something?
I think if there's one thing I learned about Vince McMahon in this documentary, it's that he's probably got a little bit of OCD. He does not like to sit still.
Right.
He does not like to be doing nothing. So he is probably trying to come up with something to do. I don't think it's smart for him to launch it now, but he can obviously plan out stuff and have stuff in place. So the day after he gets cleared, in his case, hopefully, he's able to launch something. Now, do I think it would be a wrestling company? I think, as crazy as it sounds, the only way that happens is if he actually does an indie company.
Or some people say he buys the NWA because that would fit his, his vision, the NWA type of thing.
That'd be interesting. That'd be a full circle moment.
Yeah, it would be.
Never
but
been involved with them, tried to stay away from them, gets involved in the NWA.
The only thing is, because Chris and I talked about this, if he starts another wrestling company, what wrestler's going to really want to work for him? Because obviously, all the wrestlers I think that can't really wrestle anymore. And all the wrestlers that probably that are Vince guys in WWE are probably better off just staying in WWE, like a Roman Reigns, because Roman Reigns can't do the tribal chief thing anymore or anything like that if he leaves WWE.
I think if you're able to, I think you bring him back, not in a producing role, but because he does want to have a little bit of control, you bring him back as Mr. McMahon, the character, and you say, hey, you know what? You're not going to be scripted. We're going to give you bullet points. Hit the bullet points. Hit them however you want to do that.
I think you booked...
So they can let him be Mr. McMahon one more time, and if you're going to do that, though, and you're going to bring him back, he's not going to be anything but the main event and the main heel. And you say, this is the last run. This is not going to be last run until the next one. Really it for you, because, not to be mean, dude, you're old.
Right.
Could happen. So, I'd like to see him come back if he's able to, if everything's clear.
I think you want to see that storyline where he tries to take the company back from Triple H and everything, and TKO.
Oh, I love it. I saw, who did it? Some guy suggested, because obviously everyone always likes to do the conspiracy on, what if the NWO did come back? That would be the time to no doubt do it.
That'd be interesting.
And you know how you do it is you have him come back and say, what, I can't bring the NWO back because I was never in it? Funny, because the first guy who's going to be running it with me actually knows a thing or two about running the NWO, and then Hogan comes out.
And no one like Hogan right now, so that would work perfectly. So.
I don't really like Hogan right now, so to bring him out. And you know what you do? You have him come out with the NWO shirt, and then he turns around, and there's, because people are pissed about it for promoting the All-American Beer logo in black and white.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, but that's the end of the Vince documentary. Episode 6 is a decent episode. It's actually really good. It's not a comfortable episode to watch though. Once they get into like the Vince allegations and everything like that, I bet that's funny in the documentary, and I think it kind of really tells you how the relationship between Bruce and Vince is. It's like right before the second allegations come out. Bruce Pritchard mentions. That he's seen some of the episodes of the documentary and that he doesn't really like it because he didn't paint Vince in a great light. And he mentions kind of why he's always been a Vince guy, and his wife got really bad cancer, and best she had 2 years to live, and he doesn't say it, but it's implied Vince helped her out and got her good
healthcare.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's something I can agree with easily.
Yeah.
I think the show, it has the same issue that Dark Side of the Ring has. You know, they come in and they say, you know, we're going to be the unbiased review because we're not WWE. Right there, when you say that, you are saying, no, we are biased. We're anti-WWE because everything they put up show them that we're going to balance the scale. Look, I understand, and I get it. You want to balance the scale because WWE always likes to shift things toward them. Just how it is. But I would like it if these people could be a little more unbiased because I think they should have reached out to more people that supported Vince and had them interviewed as well.
Yeah, because I think that's not cool that they do with that Bruce Pritchard interview is when he mentions that, the next thing that they show is all the stuff that you mentioned about Vince that came out earlier last year. So it's like, Bruce was probably pissed that they did that and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's a low blow.
Yeah. But that's the end of the Vince documentary. You know, obviously the other highlight is some of the interview questions when Vince gets asked them. Like, he didn't remember any of the Sable allegations or any of that. He didn't remember any of that. There's a point where, he didn't really know if it was a storyline or not. Where he got upset that, like, Eric Bischoff was doing the same thing that he did at the territories type of thing. And then when he got called out on it, he didn't really respond to it and all that type of stuff. So this, when you see Vince talk, it actually is funny because sometimes Vince changes his mind. What did you think about Vince when he actually talking to the president about his past was perceived and presented and all that type of stuff?
Oh, don't get me wrong. I think Vince is out of his mind. I think he's insane. Yeah.
And some notable people that showed up during like the interview process. You know, Meltzer was in this a lot. Cody showed up for a good part of it. Actually, when they talk about that stuff that happened with Vince, the only one that gets interviewed about it, other than, you know, obviously the journalists and stuff, the other one that comes out and talks about in WWE is Cody, which is pretty interesting. You know, Eric Bischoff shows up a lot during the Monday Night Wars time frame. Tony Atlas is in this a lot more than you would think. Obviously, which is kind of shocking. I didn't think he was going to be in it that much, but he was in this a lot. Heyman was in this a lot. The biggest surprise of someone that didn't show up in this was Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns didn't do an interview. I'm going to guess, because most of that was from the 2021, that he was probably trying to protect his character at the time. Because this is because obviously that had to do with it. No wrestler nowadays other than Cody, I think, showed up really for it, and like Triple H, I guess. So, right. But overall, I liked the interview. If I had to say people I didn't really like that got interviewed, sometimes Meltzer said something that pissed me off, and sometimes...
Can't stand Meltzer. I have never been able to stand him.
Yeah, and then Mushnick kind of said some things that pissed me off a little bit too, but, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, we have to do a nice little letter grade on the Vince documentary. I'm going to start with you, you know, because a lot of people have been, you know, they have either hated this or have either really liked this. There's not an in-between, so it's going to be interesting to see what you think of this. If you had to give the Vince documentary a nice little letter grade, what would you give this as a letter grade?
It's just above a thumbs in the middle for me, so I'm going to go C+.
C+.
It's okay. I think there's a lot left to be desired.
Like, what do you think they could have done better that would have made you like it more?
That what I just said. They needed to interview more people.
Yeah.
I don't think 6 episodes is enough to get done what they were looking to do. I think that would have been... Where it ended would have been a great point for that to be the first half of the documentary. They could have gone into so much more.
Right. I know, because like you said, in episode 6, they jumped from the Chris Benoit tragedy to like the network launch, and there's a lot of stuff in between they didn't really cover.
It's funny because... Excuse me. obviously this is supposed to be about the sex scandal. That's where this is all stemming from. That's the interest. But that's not all they talk about. They talk about a lot. So, like they really could have gone from episode 1 to episode 6 if they really wanted to focus on the sex scandal stuff.
Right.
They wanted to, but they didn't. So my question is, that I think they were doing good the first 5 episodes. They were kind of going. They were jumping around about as much as they needed to, and then I really would have liked to see more of the PG era Vince, the stuff that was going on then.
Yeah.
Because but the problem is that was a point at which we would talk about this is very casual, fan-oriented documentary.
Yeah, it is.
But at the same time, they took the time to talk about the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era. So why not talk about the PG era? Because as much as hardcore fans will tell you they don't like that era or they had issues with it, I think there was a lot more interesting stuff that happened in the PG era than people are willing to admit.
Yeah.
That they should have talked about.
Yeah.
The rise of Super Cena, I think we should still talk about it. How Vince leaned into him maybe a little too much. And I think maybe they should have had people talking about the fact that, Vince was starting to lose his edge. And then WrestleMania 30 happened, like I said, and he became a stubborn old man.
I feel like
I think he was jealous of Triple H.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
I feel like they talked about Vince was losing his edge, but they didn't really mention that it was mainly Vince that was losing his edge. They mentioned the product more so was losing his edge, but it wasn't the product. It was Vince that was losing his edge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do agree with you. I think Vince was always jealous of Triple H because the biggest example of that is I remember the big thing we would talk about is anytime an NXT talent would get called up, they would be immediately buried for the most part. I think maybe that was Vince taking out his jealousy on Triple H on that talent and all that type of stuff.
It felt that way. It really did. I mean, the only person who gets a little bit of a pass there with Vince is Finn Balor because he did put the title right on him. The fact that he got injured, no one could prepare for.
Well, Kevin Owens did pretty well.
Yeah, I know. Vince worked with Kevin Owens pretty well. He did, yeah. The Shield, obviously, but I mean that was early NXT, so I don't know if that counts.
Right.
But it must have been WrestleMania 35. Right before that, he brought up a bunch of random guys. I think he brought up Ciampa, Gargano, Black, and Ricochet.
Yeah.
And even though we all knew in the back of our minds, if not the front of our minds, when we saw an NXT, I'd say back of our minds, when we saw an NXT talent, a vignette for them, like, the back of our minds, we knew, like, yeah, this is going to end badly, but hey, we'll enjoy that initial burst. I remember when they showed that on Raw, everyone was just like, ugh.
Yep.
It wasn't excitement that we're getting 4 call-ups. It was, well, great. NXT just lost 4 of its biggest stars, and now I have to, if I want to watch Raw, endure watching them completely fail.
Mm-hmm.
Which was half true. Gargano and Ciampa sucked on the main roster under Vince. Black and Ricochet worked for a little bit.
Yeah, they worked for a little bit.
Black was fine. He was consistent at least.
I think Black fell once the pandemic hit. Because they started doing that stuff where, like, he lost his eye and everything like that, and it felt...
And not for nothing, that was so stupid. So what did he do? I'm going to go to AEW and keep it going. Why? Why? You left because it was stupid. And you're like, it's so stupid that I'm going to keep it. That doesn't make sense.
I hate to tell you, he didn't leave. He got fired, actually. So,
yeah. Well, he got let go. I mean, yeah.
But yeah, I'll give my letter grade on the documentary. I'll give it like a B minus. I think it's a pretty solid documentary. You know, some things I would cut out. It also feels like they talk about a lot of things that aren't really tied to Vince, like the rise of Hulkamania, the Attitude Era. I know that's all about Vince, but I just feel like they kind of trail off a lot and kind of don't really talk about like Vince. They kind of talk about more so the product, and I guess it's kind of tough because it's like one of those things. I guess where you have to Vince created WWE, so you have to talk about those things.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's some stuff I wish that we could have gotten more, that, you know, but I think this is a solid B minus. You know, some of the interviews are pretty entertaining and things like that. Some wrestlers you would think would be in it more, like Taker. Like, they didn't really talk about, too, like Taker's character, because that's a big Vince success story right there. You would have thought they would have brought that up a lot, type of thing. And they didn't really talk about their relationship all that much and all that type of stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of the Vince documentary review, Mr. McMahon. Will we do this series again? I think we will. I don't know exactly when, but I picked the first thing we reviewed, Steve. What do you can pick the next thing. What do you want to review next? You can announce it here for the next thing in the documentary series.
Well, I think I said Dark Side of the Ring enough times that I would be mistaken to not say we should go right for season 1, episode 1, Macho Man and Elizabeth.
All right, we'll find a time to do that. We'll review Dark Side.
I may even wear my Macho Man bandana.
All right. We'll have to schedule that and see if we can do that. And I promise it won't be as long. The Vince talk went 3 hours. It's because we had 6 episodes of this stuff to watch.
6 episodes. The Macho Man documentary is an hour, and we can probably get it done in at most an hour.
Right. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Let's do some plugs and promotion. Do you have anything you want to plug, Steve? You probably don't, but it's always nice to ask.
Don't do drugs, kids.
Don't do drugs. Yeah, check out more of this series. Maybe Steve and I will talk off camera when we'll do this again.
And I will plug this, that Owen and Chris, John, James, or even if any of you guys are watching and you want to predict Saturday night's main events is coming up, and I am willing to defend for the first time in God knows how long the Aftershock Predictions Championship.
Now, are we just predicting WWE shows, or is this all wrestling shows? It's probably going to just be WWE, admittedly, because that's the thing that we all watch.
Probably, but all the same, whenever.
All right. I mean, I mean, that's just taking shots, but it's probably never going to be.
I would have defended it at Netflix Raw if we, since we had the card in advance.
I know, but we didn't think to do that. So, but yeah, check out the other stuff on this channel. WWE Aftershocks come back. We've done a couple episodes. We've done a few retros. We did retro Royal Rumbles 2017 and 2020. We just did this video. We have more retros coming up. We're gonna start the retros of John Cena. We're gonna do the prototype, his entire run as the prototype, and we're gonna do his main roster debut, the first SmackDown. Steve, you're due to pick a retro. It could be anything. I might be nice and let you pick any show you want, or you could pick a John.
Pick a retro review too. Damn, I'm getting lucky today. Let's see.
It could be
retro review.
I'll let you pick any show you want. I know. Well, maybe try not to pick a Raw though, because we can't find Raws at the moment.
That's true. I'm just kind of thinking in my head. If you want to plug anything else while I'm thinking about it, feel free to.
Check out the Old the Talkinator channel. We have some videos we're going to do there. We were supposed to come back and do videos this week, but my cousin lost his Wi-Fi. So, you know, well, he didn't lose his his Wi-Fi's not working. To make it sound like he lost his router, but no, like he didn't lose his router. He just having Wi-Fi issues. So we're going to do some stuff. GM. You know, just check out the past episodes. I AJ's winning somehow, even though he only has one trophy. I don't think I can get a trophy, so we'll see what happens. But we'll see. All right. Did you pick a? Did you think?
I don't know. I don't have a specific answer for you, but because I don't think we do it too much, my retro, we're going to the Impact Zone.
Going to the Impact. We went there once for Rebellion 2005. So.
I know what we can do. I'm gonna do. Let's see if I have the year correct. I believe it was 2009. Lockdown, Lowell, Massachusetts.
All right, Lockdown 2009. I'll add that to the list. We'll have to find.
Quick preview of what I remember seeing live at that show: the electrified steel cage match. What a dumb thing I had to watch. I want to make sure it was 2009. Really
yeah, that doesn't sound like it's 2009. And that might be
2008. 2008.
Yeah, I think
it's 2008. It was Lockdown 2008. They had the steel cage match where it was electrified, and they would just shake their bodies as violently as possible to make it look like it was actually electrified. It was so stupid.
Well, there's a lot of wild stuff on this show. I'm reading this 6 teams cuffed in the cage match. I don't even know what that means.
Oh my god, I remember that. Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle was a friggin' barn burner, though.
Yeah, I'll have to definitely watch this. So, I thought this was going to be the show where James Storm fought, what's his name? His first tag partner. Not Chris Hero.
Chris Harris?
Yeah, Chris Harris and the blindfold cage match, but that's not this show. So, but yeah, that's pretty much. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you guys for watching this video, and since we recorded in the past, we will talk to you guys in the future.